Okay. Hi there. My name is John Clarici. We're going to get going here real quick. We have people on the Zoom. We have people in the room. This is great. Thank you all very much. I'm going to deal with some logistical things, the two things whenever you run a public meeting, and they're the most important things in the world. The bathrooms are out there. The men's room's on this side of the coffee thing, and the ladies' room is on the other side of the coffee thing. And if this building were to catch on fire, or if there's an earthquake, or a tsunami, or a tornado, anything, go outside. Go through that door and go outside and stay away from everything. That is your safety discussion for the moment. Now, Sean is going to tell you about the really important stuff, and then you'll have to listen to me for a few more minutes. Go.
All right, we'll adjust this for shorter people now here. Good afternoon, everyone. Sean Tejan with the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. I want to thank you all for coming here today on behalf of the North State Super Region, which is part of the 16 most northern counties here in California. We're pleased to have you all here as state, regional, and local partners as we talk about how do we plan for transportation in the future and collaborate and work together with the various issues that we have. In terms of I also want to thank Chair Eager and the CTC commissioners here in person, as well as those that are participating remotely. We're very appreciative of the amount of folks that are on here. We're grateful to have you here. We look forward to the discussions and kind of a question and answer and how we partner together. In terms of a couple of other just quick logistical things here, the drink table out there has all the different items if you need them, water, tea, coffee, feel free to get those as you want. We will be having our presentations in here. When we get done, that wall behind all of those that wanted to be like in classroom and sit towards the back of the room, that's going to be removed, and we will then have a reception afterwards, a social hour for us to get together, to catch up. I know many of us, we were talking about the super region, we haven't been together in person for quite a while, to be able to share thoughts, to get together and have a further conversation after this. We will do a little bit more logistics on that at the end. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to John, I think, at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you.
I did forget one other thing.
Oh.
Can't forget, we have several sponsors today that I want to thank specifically for helping make this event a possibility in helping us. We had 4 sponsors today, specifically Mark Thomas and GHG, helping us out with the cost of the event, as well as the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership and DKS. So if you could all at least please quickly give a round of applause for their support. Mark Thomas has a table out there, so feel free to talk with them. The other sponsors, they are here floating around in the room today. Thank them for their support. I know we work with them a lot of us at different times on different projects that they help support us and make things possible in our regions, and we are thankful for their support for this event today as well. Now I'm done.
Okay, yes. Never forget the money, people. Okay, and I would like to say thank you to CERTA for putting all of this together. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of hours, a lot of coordination. This very nice facility that we were able to be in, kind of a one-stop shop with the conference rooms, and you could stay in the hotel. They have an excellent restaurant over there, a very good bar over there. So if you want to go there later after we have our reception and eat, that's great. Or you can go to downtown Reading where they have, after 6, free parking. So it's a big deal. All right. Now I get to read. Greetings, Chair Eager, Commissioners, honored guests. Welcome to the 2023 North State Super Region. North State Super Region CTC workshop. I should never take my eyes off of this. My name is John Clarici. I am the chair of the NSSR, as well as the executive secretary of the Lassen County Transportation Commission. Since it has been a few years since we last met in person, I would like to share a little information about the North State Super Region. And I don't have, this is all you're going to see, besides me over there, this map, because it's really I'm going to talk to it. The NSSR was founded in 2010, so we're going into our 13th year or our second decade. The goals of the North State Super Region are to collaborate on the endorsement of projects, share resources and information, and bring political attention to the needs of the area, including interregional roads, transit, and goods movement. We're here to unite as a larger voice to influence state and federal policy and funding priorities. To coordinate compliance with state and federal requirements, including transportation planning and air quality regulations, and to share and generate innovative ideas for project delivery and funding. And we have other things as well, but those are kind of the biggies. This is a factoids. We are 16 counties. As you can see, we make up most of Northern California. We are 27% of California's landmass, or roughly 44,500 square miles, and 37% of its state and federal roads. But less than 3% of the state's 39 million people. The population of the North State Super Region as of 2020 was around 1,061,000. But of the population, 631,000 people reside in 4 counties, Butte, Humboldt, Nevada, and Shasta. So if you take 4 counties out, the 12 counties have like 500,000 people. So it's not a lot of us. And 7 counties experienced population loss in the 2020 census, and those would be Butte, Del Norte, Lassen, Modoc, Plumas, Sierra, and Siskiyou. Our population density overall is 23 people per square mile, less than 1/10 the statewide average, and Modoc County, fighting Modoc County, has slightly less than 2 people per square mile. So if you really want to get away from people, go to Modoc County. It's pretty sparse. But we are home to vast stretches of agricultural land, ranching, timbering, education, both technical and higher. Natural wonders, open vistas, multitudes of recreational opportunities. We are where Californians and the world come to play. And at times we feel forgotten by the folks in Sacramento, no offense. We struggle to respond to legislation and requirements geared for the more urban parts of the state. Legislation and rules frequently influenced or written by the big counties and COGs with little or very little input from the NSSR. These can include requirements for ZEV transit transitioning, prohibitions to all capacity increasing projects irrespective of their need, focusing on urban-based mobility solutions that work in some of the NSSR but have few practical applications in the less densely populated counties that make up most of the super region. Or we're completely dismiss, let's see, hold on, make sure I'm, okay. Or completely dismissing climate risks in rural areas in favor of the more densely populated coastal parts of the state. A case in point, draft 2023 State Highway Systems Management Plan, the SHISMP, that showed only discretionary climate shop funding to address sea level rise in coastal districts, a potential problem, and excluded climate risks associated with the very real damage caused to infrastructure and air quality by more intense wildland fires. But the NSSR is a feisty bunch, and we find ways to make things work. You will see presentations showcasing how we respond to, or as part of, the work of our ZEV and transit working groups, our Fix 5 Gateway project, the Pitt River Bridge project. We will hear about emergency evacuation planning and projects. And one special thing that we actually saw some of when it first happened in Chico, the Town of Paradise Recovery, which is 3 years in the making now, I think. In addition, NSSR members are, so this is some of the stuff we're not going to hear about today, but I want you to know about. Creating multi-county, multi-state coalitions to improve highway safety. That's what Lassen County is doing with the US 395 Coalition. Lassen County working with Washoe County, Nevada, and California, sharing information across state lines. Your staff has been an active part of this work. We're bringing ZEV to life with hydrogen fueling in vehicles in Humboldt County. I'm so excited about whatever happens with that because it's intriguing. Challenging and reevaluating established technical tools to make them work better for rural California. That's an initiative being done by the Nevada County Transportation Commission looking at the induced demand modeling that gets done. Rural California wants to share in these solutions to address things like GHG, climate change, congestion, and mobility, but we need the resources and the appropriate tools to make that work. What we really need are people in Sacramento that understand our challenges and are willing to help us out. Not a handout, but a true collaboration. We hope today, as it has been in the past, provides for a robust discussion around all these important topics between all of you and all of us. So once again, welcome. And not that you would have any questions, but I have to ask, are there any questions? Good. Okay. Now I'm going to give this back to Sean, I believe. Yeah, you. Come on. Anyway, thank you very much.
No, thanks, John. First, we're going to have Dave Moore, Caltrans District 2 Director, come up and do a presentation. Then I will follow after that.
Good afternoon, Chair Eager, commissioners, North State partners, and everybody else out there. Here to welcome you on behalf of Caltrans to the North State. It's very happy to have you guys up here today and tomorrow. It's not often that you get up here, so we definitely appreciate it. And we also appreciate knowing that if you look at the makeup of the commission, we really don't have a representative from this area up here on the commission. So having that opportunity to share some of our concerns is greatly appreciated. So we're very happy to be here. Water is life, and I know that's not necessarily transportation, but water's been a big topic on the minds of the counties and the people up here in the North State, and we're happy to have a pretty good water year this year. This photo wasn't taken this year, but it was. We're in very similar situations. Shasta Lake is only down just under 17 feet this morning, and it is the headwaters of the Central Valley Project and is the largest reservoir in California, feeding communities down the Central Valley all the way down to Southern California. So. We're glad to do our part. Also on behalf, I wanted to explain a little bit of the Caltrans makeup and how we interact with the North State Super Region, as well as how we function. You may have heard the term within Caltrans, the North Region, and maybe not understand how that really relates to the individual districts in the North Region. So if you take districts 1, 2, and 3, which all the North State super region counties reside in, we have 3 districts. We have Matt Brady, the District 1 Director, myself, and Amarjeet Benapal, the District 3 Director, and Amarjeet's around here somewhere. There he is. And we work pretty closely with the North State super region. In terms of the commission, a lot of stuff that you deal with Caltrans on is on the project delivery side. So what the North Region concept is that we share resources for project delivery efforts across the 3 districts so that we're able to workload level across those 22 counties that make up the North Region. We have employees that sit Redding, Eureka, and Marysville, and they actually work on projects throughout the entire region depending on how that workload leveling takes place. So Amarjeet, Matt, and myself have a pretty strong working relationship together to help deliver that for the North Region. I did want to focus a little bit on District 2 since you're here in District 2. This is our leadership team here at District 2. We have Brett Ditzler, our newly appointed Deputy District Director for Planning and Local Assistance. Kristen Kingsley, our Deputy District Director for Asset Management and Program Project Management. And if I'm not at a commission meeting defending an ask from District 2, it'll be Kristen that'll be there defending it for us. So, or answering your questions and concerns with those requests. Michael Webb is our Deputy District Director for Maintenance and Operations, and Melissa Rose is our Deputy District Director for Administration. Some of this team is around today. They'll be around tomorrow, so please feel free to ask questions, interact, and we have a wealth of information that we could share. District 2, if I go back, District 2 itself is made up of 7 of the 22 counties of the North region there: Siskiyou, Modoc, Shasta, Lassen, Tehama, Plumas, and Trinity. A couple things about District 2. District 2 is almost the largest Caltrans district in the state. So we are 70 square miles smaller than District 8. But pretty much you could say it's almost the biggest large mass in one single district. You'll see a lot of overlap with what John has shared with you. We did not collaborate ahead of time. And my numbers may not reflect the 2020 census, so there might be some differences there. But if you look at the 7 counties that make up District 2, our average population is 13 people per square mile, as compared to a statewide average of 225. That's an easy number, but actually, as John pointed out, it's actually much worse than that when you get outside the Interstate 5 corridor. So the 3 counties, Tehama, Shasta, and Siskiyou, where the I-5 corridor runs through, it carries 82% of the district's population. And probably a majority of that population at 3 counties lives within 30 miles of Interstate 5. So Interstate 5 is the lifeline of the North State. It's the lifeline of the Pacific Northwest. There is no other interstate and multi-lane interstate on the West Coast that runs north-south like Interstate 5. So Interstate 5 is important. You'll see some presentations on Interstate 5. And quite frankly, if it's not there, goods movement, we're pushing all those trucks and everything on 2-lane conventional highways. Jesus keeps jumping ahead. We maintain 1,738 center lane miles. That represents about 11.5% of the Caltrans statewide highway mileage that we maintain. Of that, we actually have 3,953 lane miles, which only represents about 7% of the total lane miles on the California highway system. So what that tells you is almost all the lane miles outside of Interstate 5 and District 2 are 2-lane conventional highways. So only about 100 miles of passing lanes or multi-lane facilities outside of the interstate. A couple more things, just a little bit about the district. As I mentioned, 7 counties. There are 18 cities within those 7 counties. We also coordinate and work with 10 federally recognized tribes whose tribal offices actually reside within District 2. There's another 8 federally recognized tribes whose tribal offices reside either in Nevada, Oregon, District 3, or District 1 that we also consult with because their ancestral territory is in District 2. In addition to that, with the complicated tribal laws on how tribals gain their recognition, we have another dozen or so non-federally recognized tribes that we do coordinate and work with. One last thing I wanted to talk about, and John hit on it when he talked about wildfire. District 2 is subject, a large portion of our project delivery program, unfortunately, is emergency events. Whether that's wildfires, slides, flooding, those kinds of things, it's a growing issue. So extreme weather events, it's culminated with the fact that 2018, 2020, and 2021, we had record fire years, and the North State was hit especially hard during those times. In fact, in 2021, of the 2.6 million acres that burned statewide, 70% of that acreage burned in District 2. So if you look at those 3 years, it's been a buildup of one major fire after another. And you'll hear later about Paradise's recovery efforts. Every year we're losing communities up here in the small rural area. And with that, These fire scars, the damage doesn't go away after the fire is gone. What we're experiencing in places like the Feather River Canyon on Highway 70, where we've had I'll say in excess of a 3-month closure for that highway due to slides and ongoing slides from the fire scar areas of the Dixie Fire. So continue issues, continue problems with those extreme weather events. And the 3 largest fires in California history occurred up here in the North Region counties. So, and they were all in the last 4 years. With that, I did want to share the beauty of the North State with you. As everybody faces out there, we all know it's pretty hard to find talented people to work in transportation these days. So we did a recruitment video that we wanted to show off the beauty of the North State and what the Redding area has to offer. So I wanted to play that video for you guys today. We know it worked earlier. Well, we might not get volume, but. Well, there's a really nice narrative that goes with it, but as you see from the pictures, this is really what we wanted to show you is some of the things that the North State has to offer.
You can start singing.
And we push this video out on social media, just trying to attract a lot of people. Once they come to Redding and the North State, realize the beauty of it, but it's hard to attract people to the North State that haven't been here. So you'll find that out there on our social media. All right. And with that, like I said, I will be around this afternoon and this evening. If you have any questions or want to talk to me about anything we talked about today or some of the presentations, seek us out. And I don't know if there's any quick questions right now.
I don't have a question, but I do have to apologize for just a minute. Tony Tavares has his confirmation hearing right now at the Senate, so I have to jump off here real fast and go say some wonderful things about him, and I'll be right back.
All right, and if there's no other questions right now, we'll turn this back over to Sean. Are you next?
Thanks, Dave. It was great to be able to see a snapshot of what's going on the Caltrans side of things and what's taking place in the region. Sterling, again, good afternoon and welcome to the Shasta County region. Sean Tejan, Executive Director of the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. We welcome you here today. And as the MPO and Regional Transportation Planning Agency for the Shasta region, we're working with our regional partners to improve transportation of all modes for all users now and into the future. And many of us are doing that today for those that are here. And in short, we're working together to plan for tomorrow's transportation. And that's what our conversation is about here today. How do we work together and how do we collaborate, both as state agencies and commissions, as Caltrans districts, as regional agencies and local government, and even with our community-based organizations, our tribal governments, and the communities that we live in and that we live around. How do we work together to create cost-effective transportation in our regions and our communities that connect us? And here in the Shasta region, this effort is led by our 7-member board of directors, which is represented by the cities of Anderson, Redding, and Shasta Lake, the County of Shasta, and the Redding Area Bus Authority, which is our primary public transit provider. Now, before I talk about a few of the projects and what's going on, I wanted to share a few things about the region. And of course, many of you are well aware of a lot of our iconic recreational locations from Shasta Lake and Whiskeytown, Lassen National Park and Bernie Falls, and of course, who can forget the iconic Sundial Bridge, which many of us enjoy walking or biking or enjoying when the salmon runs take place. But did you also know that Shasta County was founded in 1850, which is the same year in which California became the 31st state of the United States? And if my research is correct, I believe the cities of Los Angeles and San Francisco also came during that time. And San Francisco's population was 21,000, and the city of LA was around 1,200 or 1,600 at the time back then. We're a large region, 3,800 square miles, a little more than that. You could fit Delaware, Rhode Island inside and still have room to spare. We do enjoy a very Mediterranean climate, though you might not guess that right now with the recent winter that we've had, though we're very thankful that our lakes are full. We're home to roughly 182,000 residents, and we do get to enjoy a little bit lower cost of living in our area compared to others. But might I be able to also suggest that we're roughly, where we're at in the Sacramento Valley, we're kind of a midpoint between a lot of the West Coast travel that takes place. Not only are we located at the very end and the north end of the Sacramento Valley, here where we're meeting today, we're really in the foothills before the mountains that we go over to the rest of California into Oregon and Washington. But we are almost takes just as long to get to Eureka in the north coast as it does to get to Sacramento, and just a little bit further to get to Reno. And our region's definitely a crossroads, especially when we're talking about interregional travel and freight and goods movement, which comes through a lot of our area to go in different directions through our area, and it's a challenge for us to address, especially as we have more climate issues to deal with and more frequent incidences that we have to deal with. But I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment. One exciting thing I wanted to mention, and this is also a tour teaser for those of you who are staying here tomorrow, is that we'll also soon be the first region between Sacramento and Portland, Oregon, to have an all-electric bike share in the region. This is being made possible from partnership with Shasta Living Streets, the McConnell Foundation, and the City of Redding, in which they're going to be bringing 70 electric bikes as a bike share with 25 different locations that hold docking stations in and around downtown Redding. And we're really excited for this much-anticipated project and what that means to help promote active transportation in and around the region. In May next month, May 12th, there will be a launch that will be taking place related to it, a whole day of celebration that Shasta Living Streets and their partners will be promoting. We also expect Director Tavares to hopefully be there as well. And we encourage folks to reach out and to enjoy that celebration of being able to have one of the first e-bike shares in the region. And as I talk about that, when we talk about active transportation, this is an example of one of the efforts that doesn't necessarily tie into what we do specifically, but it does rely on the planning and early work that a lot of us work together to do in partnership on. This separate regional effort to bring about a bike share fits as part of our region's collaborative planning efforts to bring active transportation. And it's helping building off our region's 180 plus miles of urban, rural, and recreational trails as imagined in our Go Shasta Active Transportation Plan, where our long-term goal is to be able to have a essentially master network, if you could say, of safe and efficient active transportation corridors that connect our cities together so people could actually live and work and travel by bike and or ped or micromobility and e-scooters and e-bikes and whatever else that we may come our way here technologically in the future. And there are some other regional items of note I'd like to talk about briefly. One, you'll hear a presentation later with airports. We have 3. Some of you got to experience what it's like having to fly into the region in far northern California with our airports, though we've had lots of increased employments. It's been the most busy that it's ever been. but it is the largest civilian facility here in the North State. Our two other small airports are general aviation airports. But one thing that ties all of them together quite often, especially not just for Shasta County, but also for a lot of our neighboring counties, is that those are used frequently for firefighting that takes place in the region, for fueling, and even sometimes into southern Oregon. And as I speak about wildfire, climate challenges plague our region and plague the entire North State. And these are significant challenges for us. For us specifically, we spent an effort of 2 years developing what we call the Resilient Shasta Plan. This is how do we create a more resilient transportation infrastructure system, working with all of our partners. And out of that, one of the things we definitely realized, not that we were anecdotally like, hey, we have more events, but then being able to look at the data, is that wildfire and flooding and snow are causing on average 18 to 26 annual shutdowns just on I-5 alone, which is a huge problem when you're talking about this is how we get up and down the West Coast. I-5 is our primary north-south corridor. So how do we deal with that? Whether it's with forest management or other activities, how do we manage this? And for example, when the Delta fire came through, all of I-5 closed for 5 days for regular traffic. And then 3 more days it took before freight was able to get through. Not only is that a significant delay in getting goods and services across the region, but it also greatly impacts our region as well. As you can see in the top left corner, we can get traffic that is backed up for 12, 14, 16 miles, almost clear all the way down here to Anderson on our system. And these are challenges for us, and we're talking about different opportunities that how to deal with this. And also, it's a concern for our communities, for detour routes. When these detours through I-5 go through, and they have to go around, it adds distance and time for travel. And a lot of the high increase in vehicles is going through smaller communities that are concerned about safety, especially if it's during the school year, where lots of these other highways are going right through nearby where schools are at and where kids are trying to cross. As we talk about infrastructure as well, I wanted to highlight that in our region, we have over 3,100 mile lanes of roadways. A significant portion of that is local, but some of it also is state, about 8%, and some of it also is federal. And on the bridge side, we have at least 517 bridges. That number is probably a little bit outdated, so it might be a little bit more now. But the responsibility of those is broken up 60% local and 40% state and federal. Of course, our biggest concern on the federal side is the Pitt River Bridge, which is the only federally owned bridge facility, and the Bureau of Reclamation wants to be done with their ownership by 2040. So how do we deal with that? And the challenges that presents is that's a very important bridge, not only for our region, but for the state of California and the entire West Coast. So how do we handle that? However, I also have to mention, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how there still needs to be money and funding to maintain our existing systems. For example, in the 2020 Local Streets and Roads Needs Assessment, just for our region alone, the next 10 years combined for needs just to maintain our systems was to the tune of $976 million. And that didn't include essential transportation facilities, which is another $170 million. And that's just for the next 10 years. This is based upon 2020 dollars. And of course, that has increased because we know how inflation as well as supply chain issues have increased that. And regardless of whether or not it takes us until 2040 or 2050 or beyond to move to a completely zero-emission transportation system, these same facilities are going to need to be maintained over the long haul because those same vehicles are going to be on those roads and bridges. And if we don't maintain those, our maintenance costs for whether state agencies, for local governments, and even for myself and our community members, our own maintenance costs of our vehicles are going to go up. And how do we also ensure public transportation is also maintained? If we don't have good roads and facilities for those to be on, maintenance costs of our transit providers also may go up. These are key challenges and things that we have to talk about as we balance our needs between all the different programs. Quickly on the infrastructure side, I want to talk about 2 projects, but very briefly, because I know one at least has a presentation later, is the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project and our Envision 273 multimodal corridor plan. On Fix 5 Cascade Gateway, I'll just say this for now. It's a collaborative effort between Caltrans and SERTA and our partners to see how we can improve our highway system in the region, but also manage freight and other issues that we have. From being creative with a freight-only lanes and a lane management system to also providing early support for zero-emission, heavy-duty, and freight. And I'll leave the rest as a teaser for the next presentation. Besides I-5, for our region specifically, State Route 273 is important because it's a detour route, and it goes through the communities of Anderson, portions of our unincorporated county, and the city of Reading. And it's really important for us as well because the railroad goes through there, and so we have a lot of conflicts that take place there with our communities, and it's a significant safety concern for us. For example, in 2017 to 2021, we determined that 1 out of every 8 fatal crashes in our region was on this 16-mile corridor alone. That's a significant issue and concern for us. And 30% of all deaths due to crashes of people walking and biking was on the same corridor. Now we are thankful and we are appreciative of being able to secure planning funds to work with Caltrans, our local partners, and our community on finding solutions for this corridor to find near-term and long-term solutions. But as an example of one of the efforts that we're working on to address safety, resiliency, and to be context sensitive in the communities that we're planning for. Briefly, I'd like to talk about public transportation as well and what we're working on that end. Although on the rail side, there's not a whole lot to say right now. The rail line that does go through here, as I said, is on 273. There are a lot of conflicts that we have, especially because of a lot of the changing of cars takes place through a corridor, which can create traffic issues, especially for emergency services, to get through and around to half of our county. So on the freight side, it's mostly there. But when we talk about passenger rail in the state of California, we want to be able to point out that passenger rail in Northern California is not really efficient. It doesn't work well. The times I have here for northbound and southbound on Coast Starlight are the average times in the early morning that people would have to take to be able to get on the Coast Starlight to be able to get down to, say, Sacramento or San Francisco or further south, or even to go up north. And it's not very convenient for those who are needing to connect to businesses, for business activities, for those that have medical needs, and those other needs, especially for those that may not be able to drive, or that may not have the ability to have access to a vehicle. But we are trying to work on that in another way on the bus side, which we'll talk about in a moment. For our region, as mentioned, we're very rural in nature. Our RABA, our primary public transit provider, covers a 100 square mile area with about 126 population base, although many of those use single occupancy vehicles to get around. It's just the nature of our area and the types of travel that takes place in business for the region. But it is relied on by a lot of other folks that have no other means to get around. And just like in urban areas, we too are still struggling to try to see ridership return to pre-COVID numbers while still trying to keep the transportation system going to meet the needs of those in our region. I would say that there is one kind of bright light that we've had, and that is with our Shasta Connect service that serves rural public transportation and does on-demand services on Sundays. That's something we've been trying to figure out how to meet our needs in our region. In that respect, in meeting the transportation needs of our seniors, veterans, individuals with low and fixed incomes, and individuals with disabilities, we've seen actually a near 100% return on pre-COVID numbers on that end for those folks. So that is at least one area where we're positive and at least trying to learn from how can we apply the lessons from that to other areas in transportation. And I wanted to mention zero emission because there are some things that we are working on. While ourselves here at SERTA and the Red Area Bus Authority are working on wrapping our fleet transition plans by June of this year, we're also here at SERTA continuing to work at CalSTA, Caltrans, RABA, and our regional partners going and making progress on long-term goals for zero emission, especially on the intercity bus side of things. One of our visions is to be able to have an intercity bus system that's from downtown Reading to downtown Sacramento with various connections along I-5 with other communities. So we have feeder services that work together. And our goal here from the start has been to try to work on this. And we try to look at it from a battery electric side, but there are challenges there. But we're hopeful that on the hydrogen side, we might be able to make some progress. Recently, we were able to secure funding from CalSTA towards a hydrogen station to be able to then work towards providing that in the region. Although we do have some concerns about supply and how do we handle that challenge itself. We think biomass to hydrogen may be an opportunity, both for the North State. We're slowly bringing these pieces together. I would add, though, that in terms of working with our partners, one challenge is still working on assistance to secure state and federal support, potentially for initial and ongoing operations of that service. As a regional intercity effort, how can we work together to make this a reality? And we welcome a dialogue with the CTC staff, our other state and regional partners on how we can make this happen. And as you hear the rest of the presentations today, I just have a couple of thoughts and questions and or ideas to pose to the group here for thought. How can we partner on these different projects? How can we work together? I'd say one might be by continuing to meet in venues like this on a more regular basis, having a conversation, being realistic about what the challenges are and how we can work together. Different areas have different needs. How can we also ensure we're providing meaningful feedback, both to CTC, so you can understand our issues and challenges, but we can also understand how to work and collaborate with you together? Is there ways that we can provide flexibility? I think you'll hear a little bit about this. As well as consider program consolidation, or in one discussion we had with previous City of LA Mayor Anthony Villagrosa, who was doing a roadshow about infrastructure. Are there opportunities in some programs maybe to do some rural set-asides? I'll pose that for discussion as something to ponder. With that, thank you for hearing me out, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Next on the hit parade, for one thing, we'll be having now some more presentations. There'll be about 20 minutes for the whole shebang, for each one, giving you some time to present and then some time to answer some questions. Hopefully we'll get a lot of questions. And then just from a standpoint, probably after the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway presentation, we will take a break. And for about 10 minutes or so, because we'll need one. So the first thing up now is the North State Transit and North State Zero Emission Vehicle Working Groups. And to talk to us about those wonderful two things is Janet Orth from the Mendocino Council of Governments.
Hello there. Who goes first? I think Jerome might be first. Yes, your slide took us up, so after you. No problem.
No, that's okay. Hi, everyone. Jerome Cariazzi. I'm a transit planner with Humboldt Transit Authority in Humboldt County. We're the main, we provide the majority of revenue miles of public transit service in Humboldt County. We're a joint powers authority, and we've been operating since about 1979. I'm just going to review quickly what this working group has accomplished to date, why it was formed, and kind of some key questions we're looking to focus on moving forward. So, quick map of some of the main transit agencies that participate in this working group across the North State region. The working group really was catalyzed from COVID. So when COVID hit, transit agencies were saying, how are we going to tackle this? How do we keep our drivers safe? How do we keep our passengers safe? Navigating all those complexities. Quickly after that, we started just reaching out to other agencies, bringing them into the conversation, which quickly grew into the clean transit regulation, innovative clean transit regulation, and the challenges and opportunities that regulation presents, and how do we navigate that. Since then, we've also started collaborating with Amtrak, collaborating with Greyhound, figuring out how we can support and augment intercity travel and intercounty travel. And we also eventually contacted the North State Super Region and eventually became a formal working group. Some examples of projects we've worked on to date. Like I said, managing COVID-19 and really figuring out how to navigate that challenge. We've also have been partnering with Caltrans on the Cal ITP program. This is an integrated ticketing program to help simplify payment of fares across transit systems and throughout the state. And we as a group have been working with Cal ITP to implement a coordinated effort across 4 counties, Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, and Mendocino. And as of this month, we're all using the same fare structure and the same payment systems, so you can actually, and the same fare capping, so you can actually travel across 4 different counties without having to navigate multiple different passes. We're also continuing to coordinate on driver shortage challenges. This is an ongoing challenge across the United States. And also tackling innovative clean transit, which is a complex issue, particularly in rural areas. I did want to leave with one key topic challenge that we're focusing on going forward, and that is operational costs. I've highlighted not only the growing gap between state and federal operating assistance funds and actual costs of operations up to this date, but I amplified that by looking at what the state and local regions and counties are looking to transit to achieve in order to achieve our overall VMT reduction targets. Transit is going to be really central at achieving that. Electric vehicles alone are not going to get us our greenhouse gas reduction goals. We have to get people out of cars, and transit is key to that. And this is a back of the envelope projection of what that looks like in terms of ridership for Humboldt specifically, what that looks like for operating costs, and then if I just continue the linear trend line of how operating assistance has been maintained to date, what that gap looks like. The numbers will change, this is back of the envelope, but the story won't. And this is a key challenge that we're looking forward to working with the state and the region in how to figure this out. I'll pass it over to Janet. I had one additional slide, but I think you could read that.
Thank you, Jerome. Well, greetings. It's an honor to be with you actually in person today and not just on the computer screen. So good to see you. There is a fair amount of crossover between the Transit Working Group and the ZEV Working Group. We're focusing on more of the electric vehicle infrastructure, although we do consider ourselves fuel agnostic in terms of zero emissions. It's clean vehicle technology is zero emissions. And so, hydrogen fuel cells are in the mix along with the electrics that you usually see. But the electric vehicle technology is here today and ready to go, so that's what we've been mostly focusing on. I put this picture up. It's a favorite photo of mine that takes me back to the days when, in the early days of the electric vehicle planning in Mendocino County, some of us have been working on these things for 30 years or more. And you may remember some of the electric vehicles were coming out back in the 90s. And we actually had a demonstration project. It was a rural test. It went for about 3 years. And we brought all the electric vehicles of the time up to Mendocino County and had people drive them and see how they do. And nobody else was doing that back then. And so I love this picture because it's the engineer I was working with drove the GM EV1 over the summit of US 101 between Willits and Ukiah. And that's the highest point between Mexico and Canada on US 101, and it snowed, so we got out and took a picture, and I just loved that image. And as you know, the electric vehicles were recalled They were gone for 10 or 15 years, and it was a long time before they came back. But they have come back in a big way, and we resumed our planning efforts around 2012 or so. And we've kept those current. Our most recent one is in 2019. So all of us rural counties are at different stages in this planning. And we'd like to see all the rural counties kind of get on the same page, and all of us have readiness plans, and it really can lead to things like funding. What's next? So this is what it looks like today. This is from the Energy Commission's website. These are public and shared private EV chargers. So actually that number's ticked up from 80,000 to 87,000 since I last looked the other day. We have in the super region 1% of those. So we have hundreds of them, not thousands or 10,000s of them. We have 1,100 in the super region. And so we do have some. I was able to drive here in my electric vehicle, okay. But as more and more vehicles come along, we're going to need a lot more of those. So, of course, they returned to the, when electric vehicles came in, the infrastructure, of course, went to the more populated areas, the urbanized areas, and that's fine. That's how it should be. But, remember, we do serve a lot of visitors. We have, people come from all over the state, the nation, the world even, and we want you to come up in your clean air vehicles to our clean air places. And we have a lot of interstate commerce, all that. So, we're going to be working on this. So we thought it would be a good idea to start a working group. We started in late 2020. It was a result of our Mendocino County plan. We thought we had to have kind of a user group, sort of a support group, share best practices, have kind of a knowledge base, do some problem solving. And we had already kind of been folded into some of the efforts with Humboldt County. Redwood Coast Energy Authority was kind enough to kind of bring us in on their coattails on some multi-county planning studies with alternative fuels that they were doing. So we had, there's a 5-county plan, there was a 9-county plan, and we thought, well, why don't we make this working group the whole 16-county super region? So we got that going, and we have a lot of smart people here. I really rely on them for a lot of ideas. So, this is just kind of a snapshot, but there are just so many things we thought about. Will the power grid be able to keep up with the electric vehicle infrastructure? What happens when, we're electrifying all our transportation and there are public safety power shutoffs because of the wildfires? Where's the resilience? Where's the backup going to be? Where's the tech support, the workforce, the training, all of that? So at this point, there is funding coming down. There is a lot of federal money coming down. It's not really even a money issue at this point. We have to apply for grants, but we lack staff to do those things. And we lack, staff in our small county organizations to even administer and manage, big grant projects. So it's complicated, So meanwhile, our group has worked on what we call our talking points, and we've come up with, the issues I just talked about, and use those for things like letter writing, grant applications, talking to our legislators, and just anything we need that for. And some of our comments have done something. We made comments to the Energy Commission about their $1.4 billion Clean Transportation Investment Plan, which is something. And before we knew it, the next round of grant funding for the rural electric vehicle grants came out with a carve-out for the 16-county super region. Is that a coincidence? I think not. So maybe we're doing some good. And we've invited speakers to come to talk to us. So you see we have some state agencies, PG&E, Tesla, Rivian. It's been educational for us, and it's also a two-way conversation. And as you know, the federal legislation brought about a new Office of Energy and Transportation, a joint office. So that's a new thing. It's those, issues are intricately related. So there's so much I want to talk about. I don't have a lot of time, but in conclusion, climate action is urgent now. We have to work on it. I'm grateful for the fellowship of my colleagues in this effort. It's been a real pleasure working together. We started out with, 4, 5, 6 people and thought we'd have kind of an online community, but turns out people actually wanted to meet. We've been meeting on Zoom for the last 2 years, and, we have about 15 or so people coming to these meetings now, every month or so. And so people want to work together and talk together and work through these issues. So I guess I'll leave you with, how can we help the commission to meet its goals, your goals? And, how can we help you help us with this effort? So reach out to us anytime, and feel free to contact me, and, we can get things done together. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Oh, come on.
I have that whole list of talking points if you ever want to see it.
John, I think we got going here without even giving us an opportunity to introduce ourselves.
You're kidding.
So why don't we take a second to do that? Yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
That's okay.
No, it's not.
No, you guys had so much to get into, and you got into it so quickly. I didn't even realize it till about 5 minutes ago. Our chair, Leanne Eager, is busy trying to get Caltrans director Tony Tavares confirmed by the state senate, so she will be back as soon as she gets her testimony in. My name is Joe Liu. I'm a commissioner on the California Transportation Commission, and have been for about the last 3 years. When I turn it over to Commissioner Bradshaw.
Yeah, Jay Bradshaw, been on the commission just about a year, and really honored to be here. I really like the interaction and actually seeing and feeling what's going on throughout the state. Already I can see from the presentations. You got a vibrant crew of pros here, and I would imagine, I'm guessing, but I would imagine some pretty good community input going on. More a trivia thing or not, just to give you a heads up on me. My day job is I oversee the NorCal Carpenters Union, which represents 37,000 folks out there. A lot of them involved in the transportation as well. Separate issue, but just to share a little bit about myself as well. So really good to be here, and I love what you said about how can we help each other and work together. So that's certainly, I know, not to speak for our fellow commissioners, but a lot of the approach of this team. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Joe Cruz. I've been on the commission about 3 or 4 weeks now, so brand new and glad to be here. Been involved in the transportation industry for 25 plus years, have a lot of friends in the room, have been really involved in project delivery, in all sort of facets of transportation, highway, roadway, transit, bike and ped. I'm a big firm believer in complete streets, but also in developing a network system in California that keeps our state competitive economically. My day job is I'm the political director for the California State Council of Laborers. So I represent a lot of 70,000 hardworking union members who build our state's infrastructure from water, energy, transportation. And my primary responsibility with them is to keep them working in California, but it's an honor to be here. It's a privilege to hear what the North State's priorities are. I have a daughter who goes to Chico State, so I spend a lot of time up and down Highway 99, and I see the work that's being done to improve people's quality of life and also move those really precious goods that we produce up north to markets worldwide. So good to be here.
And Janet, to answer your question, I think you guys are doing all the right things. And my day job is I'm the president and CEO of Coalition for Clean Air, so you can see how what you're doing is right up the alley of what I do every day. So really glad to hear that. if we probably don't have time for this, and I know you know a lot of our staff, but if our staff could just stand and so we can let you know, you can see the faces of the folks who are on the CTC staff. Yeah, they do an absolutely amazing job. We couldn't get anything done without them at all. And it's absolutely amazing with our small staff, the ability to move billions of dollars every year through CTC to places like this where we can help pay for some maintaining and building those roads and dealing with culverts and bridges and all that other stuff, the public transit and all of it. So anyway, I wanted to take that opportunity to just get guys to know us a little bit. And we'll take it back over to you. I know you guys have a lot to get through today, but John.
We have at least one commissioner online as well.
Oh, that's right. I think Commissioner Norton is online.
Commissioner Martinez, we lost Commissioner Norton, and Commissioner and Vice Chair Gardino had to testify to the Senate.
Oh, they're all testifying in the Senate. But
Joe, just move forward. I'm enjoying the presentations.
okay, thank you, Commissioner Martinez. John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Once again, apologies on the faux pas. Are there any questions to these two fine people? They have done great work. I was an early member of the ZEV working group, and boy, I learned a lot real fast. And Janet's had to put up with me. So if there are any questions, once again, we will be engaging in activities after these. So when you see these people, ask them anything you want. But I know they're doing great work. So
We'll be around, so please come up and talk to us anytime.
Thanks. Let's see here. For the two gentlemen on this end, International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Local 6, North Bay Division, book number 4152. Yeah, all right.
We got one more seat for the Labor Caucus side of the table.
Oh,
If you wanna
it's how I paid my way through college.
We'll waive the initiation fee. It's all
Well,
good.
thank you very much. Yeah, I worked in a sugar mill in Crockett in the warehouse, and that's how I paid my way through the University of California. So I owe my education and my future to the union. Okay. Our next one, and I'll get this right hopefully, is the rural areas and induced demand. Mike Woodman, Nevada County Transportation Commission. Mike, come on down.
All right, thank you. Give us a minute to get the presentation pulled up. We have our consultant attending from Thailand. It is early.
They can go ahead and start sharing.
Great. Commissioners, Mike Woodman, Executive Director of the Nevada County Transportation Commission. The purpose of today's presentation is to highlight the background behind the purpose of the currently underway Rural Induced Demand Study and to highlight some of the takeaways and next steps in the process. With the recent state policies and guidance focused on reducing vehicle miles traveled, as you've heard about today, rural agencies have been focused and actively engaged in implementing active transportation projects, expanding zero-emission charging infrastructure, exploring opportunities to re-envision transit delivery models, integration of micromobility options, and also conducting planning efforts to look at extending passenger rail into our regions. However, the rural regional agencies continue to face challenges in securing state funding and support for priority highway projects that are generalized as potential to induce demand. Rural agencies have voiced concerns that these projects are being mischaracterized and therefore disadvantaged. These ongoing issues and concerns ultimately led to the Rural Counties Task Force funding this study to analyze research and research the topic of induced demand and provide data and clarity and guidance on this issue. The reason this is so important to us is these projects that are of concern are primarily focused on reducing injuries and fatalities, improving operations on our highways, and facilitating goods movement as well as safe community evacuation. This study is being funded collectively by the Rural Counties Task Force, representing the 26 rural regional transportation planning agencies, and being managed by the Nevada County Transportation Commission. The study is being conducted by a consultant team comprised of technical experts from DKS and GHD Inc., and including academic research support. With that, I will now hand the presentation to Don Hubbard with GHD to discuss the study effort in more detail.
Thank you, Mike. So as you can see, the recent state guidance, such as the Caltrans TAF and the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure and other things, they've established policies for pursuing VMT reduction, and induced demand is the centerpiece of those policies. There are some concerns in rural area among rural agencies that a lot of the guidance is taking a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't take into account the absence of significant congestion in rural corridors. And this could, as Mike said, have serious unintended consequences. It does hinder projects that are important for other goals, such as emergency evacuation and accident reduction. And it could unfairly disadvantage rural agencies in funding allocation, because if someone does find that there's a VMT and induced demand effect, there really isn't any way to mitigate it effectively in rural areas. So, and plus any money that is put into a general pool for mitigation tends to get spent in the urban areas. And the emphasis on induced demand does tend to distort the project mix and divert attention away from other areas with a greater chance of success, including success in reducing VMT. So, as Mike said, the Rural Task Force, they pooled their resources to fund this study, and Mike at NCTC is leading it. Our study has 5 components. The first is a literature review of induced demand studies, and for that, we looked at dozens of studies, including the ones that were used to develop the current guidance. Our review of that is nearly finished, and in a moment, I'll go over some of our preliminary findings. The next component is a review of existing guidance, and we're underway with that and doing the literature review based on that guidance. This includes guidance from OPR, Caltrans, and CARB. Next will be some case studies where we're looking at road projects that were done in rural parts of the state in the past and seeing whether there's any evidence that they induce demand. And we will include comparisons with other corridors where no improvements were made to see if the land uses in those catchment areas developed any differently, faster, slower, whatever we find. We sent out a request for candidate corridors a few months ago to a lot of rural agencies, and we're currently in the process of making our final selection. We'll also be looking at travel demand models and seeing how they represent induced demand, especially the models that are used in the rural parts of the state. And finally, we'll be making some recommendations on how induced demand should factor into project evaluation in rural areas. So one of the findings is that most of the literature and guidance about induced demand, they talk about elasticities. Not everyone's familiar with those. So if you're not familiar, an elasticity is the percentage change in one variable in response to a change in a different variable. So what you see in this graph, for example, you can see how vehicle miles traveled per household changes depending on how dense the neighborhood is. So an important thing to know is that an elasticity uses a straight line to approximate a curve. In this case, the red line shows the elasticity measured at one point on the curve. And you can see it's a pretty good approximation at that particular point in the curve, but it would be a very poor approximation of what the curve looks like if you chose some other household density. So for induced demand, so it says context is really important if you're going to use elasticities. So for induced demand, the most commonly used elasticity estimates the change in vehicle miles traveled in response to road capacity. So the key finding of all of our findings is that the literature review, from our literature review and review of the guidance, is that the guidance is based almost entirely on meta-studies. So a meta-study isn't original research. A meta-study is a study of other studies, and it summarizes the findings of the original research for an audience that may not have the time or the inclination to read through dozens of papers like I did. And while meta-studies serve an important function in making the findings digestible for the intended audience, it comes at the cost of filtering out other information that was in the original studies. And depending on the subject matter and the reviewer, the process of selecting one information to pass on to the audience can be distorting. The filtered information may leave the audience with a very different impression of the findings than if they had read the original work, even when the subset that is passed through is reported accurate. So you can see this on the figure on the right. So meta-studies have the effect of filtering out information. And in the case of the induced demand studies, a lot of information was filtered out. The studies we reviewed tended to present a set of data, discuss some conclusions, then often included some elasticities, usually presented as a range. The authors then discuss situations where they think the elasticities might be valid, some cautions about their use where it's not so valid, and things like that. But the guidance tends to leave out the context and the caveats and just report the elasticities. And then there'll be a table of elasticities from a bunch of different studies, and then they'll take one of those, pluck one from the list, and recommend that be used. So a person reading the guidance may get the impression that the studies they cite support a particular elasticity, when in fact the main conclusions of the studies may say something very different. So what got filtered out in the studies that we looked at? Well, we were looking particularly for research on rural induced demand, and what we found is that there's very little research on that topic. When it gets mentioned at all, it's usually with an unstated assumption that whatever's true in large metro areas probably also holds true in rural areas. We also found that the state guidance is largely based on road capacity, usually measured in lane miles. And that's a real problem for rural areas, because the research says that the thing that drives induced travel is a reduction in travel times, not additional capacity per se. So the additional capacity is just used as a proxy for reductions in travel times. It's an imperfect proxy because in the absence of congestion, additional capacity doesn't induce demand because it doesn't reduce travel times. So if you forecast induced demand using lane miles, you're going to get, and using an elasticity from a metro area, you're going to get the wrong answer or for a project in a rural area. And we would look through, well, why are they using lane miles? And the answer is because that's the data that's available. There is very little data on travel times, especially going back historically. If they wanted to compare travel times in 1965, 75, 85 for different origin destination pairs, it's almost impossible. So, but there's plenty of data on lane miles, and so that's what they're using, not because it's a good indicator, but because that's what they've got. We also found that studies that included interviews with drivers found that human behavior is not very responsive to small changes in travel times. People might leave a few minutes earlier or a few minutes later in response, depending on the road conditions, but that doesn't have any effect on VNT because they're still driving to the same place. In order to get any appreciable effect on destination choice, which means you decide to live in a different place, or you shop in a different place, or work in a different place, the travel times would have to change at least 15 minutes. That's what the survey data says. So we're talking about a major improvement in the road network before you see any change. So what we find looking at the traffic models is they're actually overestimating induced demand because they are overestimating people's responses to minor changes in the roadway network. Here's a few more things. We have dozens of conclusions. I'll just talk about three more. Number one, induced demand appears to be shrinking over time. The boom in freeway construction in the 1960s and 70s does seem to have induced a lot of demand, but the effect has gone down over time. So studies using older data find much more induced demand than studies using more recent data. So part of the reason why, if you look at the literature, the elasticities keep going down over time is because new data gets worked in and it's replacing the older stuff. It also, talked about in many of the papers, is that causality runs in both directions. Road expansion can cause land to be developed, but land development also causes new roads to be built or existing roads to be widened. For California in particular, the fact that in recent decades, VMT per capita, the growth in VMT per capita outstrips the growth in lane miles per capita indicates the supply is chasing demand, not the reverse, which is why congestion is building up in many parts of the state. And finally, some of the guidance suggests using elasticity from academic studies of entire regions, sometimes entire states, to forecast induced demand for individual projects. But the people who actually did the studies and found those elasticities say you shouldn't do that. The specific circumstances in individual corridors matter a lot. So a one-size-fits-all approach or one-size elasticity is not going to work. After all, nobody in this room would attempt to forecast traffic volumes or speeds for a new road using some statewide average or something. So why would you think it would work for induced demand? Obviously, individual corridors have their own characteristics. So last slide, our 4 preliminary takeaways are that an over-reliance on meta-studies seems to have resulted in guidance that is at least partially contradicted by the evidence, including evidence found in studies that are purportedly supporting this guidance. Second, although it appears that induced demand may occur under certain circumstances, and there is evidence that it does occur under certain circumstances, such situations are unlikely to be found in rural areas. And that said, there's so little evidence one way or the other that we feel like we have to conduct new research, independent research, to find out, because there's just an enormous blind spot in the literature on this. We would also suggest that a case could be made that in the absence of clear evidence that induced demand actually occurs in rural areas, concern over induced demand shouldn't be allowed to block projects that are being pursued pursuant to some other state goal. And this is especially true for the emergency evacuation and safety projects where lives are at stake. In other words, people may think that by assuming induced demand occurs in rural areas until it's proven otherwise, they're erring on the side of caution, but in fact, they're not. What they're doing is unintentionally prioritizing a nebulous and possibly non-existent issue over other issues where the evidence of danger to the public is clear and strong. And that's all we've got for today. If you'd like to know more about the study or be included in the distribution list when the results become available, please contact the study team at any of these email addresses. And thank you.
Thank you. So that was just a quick kind of highlight of some of the preliminary information from the study. There'll be more to come. We look forward to getting the actual project analysis for those and bringing that information at a later date. But wanted to see if there were any questions from the commission or the audience.
What's your timeline for completing it?
We're hoping to get a draft potentially by this fall and completion in the winter.
Okay, we'll make sure that our staff gets it, can share it with all the commissioners, and probably have some more conversation about this once you finish the study.
Yes, appreciate it.
Mike, I want it too, so maybe you can just distribute it to the
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah, I think John has all your emails.
Yes, I do. Well, not all your emails. Most of them.
He's like big brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Scary thought. Thank you. Wow, that was great. Isn't it? Thank you very much, sir, on the computer there. Thank you. Isn't it? Wow, that's too much. Isn't it great to have smart people come and talk to you? It's always gratifying. I guess if you wanted to be snarky, then we should start a pool that if this thing gets legs and we can actually get this out there, what will be the new excuse for not funding the projects? Anyway, I know I said it. I'm sorry.
Ouch.
Yeah, it ought to hurt. It ought to hurt. I'll tell you my sad story here. Not right now. When we're drinking, you'll hear my sad story. All right. The next thing, that was really good, by the way. You know, that's a lot of initiative right there. Mike keeps on top of this stuff. His folks there in Nevada County are really staying on top of this stuff, and we really appreciate it. This is one of these things where this organization, the North State Super Region, benefits because members go out and do stuff, and then they bring it back to us. And I'll tell you, nothing beats that. All right. Well, our last one before we take a break will be the Fix 5. Fix 5. Gateway Project. And we have Derek Willis, Caltrans, District 2. Yeah.
See if we get this set up here. Well, welcome commissioners to Anderson, Redding, the greater Redding area, and the gateway to the Cascades, the North Coast, and the inland communities. My name's Derek Willis, and I'm the Caltrans Chief for Project Management of the I-5 corridor and the Pitt River Bridge. On behalf of CERTA and Caltrans, I'll be presenting to you the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway Project. Oh yeah, I get to do this too. There you go. Interstate 5 is the West Coast major north-south corridor stretching from the border of Mexico to the Canadian border. And Shasta County, as was said earlier, and Redding are nearly equal distance from both, Mexico and Canada. Most all freight transported north-south in California via train or truck comes through the Redding area. A lot of freight. The purpose of the Fix 5 project is to safely, efficiently, and effectively move goods and people through the Redding area in the north, south, and west-east directions, all directions. We are proposing to accomplish this goal through an innovative and transformative method with managed truck lanes and transportation management systems. The Fix 5 project is largely located in the city of Redding, not all, but mostly. State Route 44 and 273 and 299 intersect and merge with I-5 within the project limits, and you can see this is 299 here, 299 west, 44, and then 273. We'll talk more about all those later. 299 west leads to Trinity County, Humboldt County, and the Port of Humboldt Bay. And State Route 44 and 299 east move goods and people east to the inland communities and connections there. Fix 5 limits, and we'll show more about this, begin at post mile 14. That's, for those of you that live around here, that's around Hartnell Overcrossing. I apologize because I know the commissioners are new to this area, and the northern limits are at post mile 22.1, which is the separation for State Route 151, or it leads into Main Street of the city of Shasta Lake. And so I'm going to just quickly move through the benefits here for the Fix 5 Cascade. With the project location kind of established, let me share some of these benefits. They'll improve safety, improve goods movement, reduce greenhouse gases, improve operations, and improve emergency evacuations. And as we review the scope, which I'll be moving to next, I'll share the benefits each aspect of the scope provides. These benefits will also match the California Action Plan and Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI. So the major scope items, as pointed out here, is construct and convert managed truck lanes, install traffic management system elements, improve operations with auxiliary lanes, install medium, heavy-duty electric vehicle chargers, and increase the vertical clearance of southbound I-5 under the State Route 273 I-5 connector ramp. And I'll show you more where those locations are. So now I'm going to be talking about the managed truck lanes. The limits are up top here, and I'll tell you more. So just quickly, I'll read through these bullets. The managed truck lanes for this region, these managed truck lanes are an innovative and transformative way of moving freight. Right now we're proposing 13.4 miles of managed truck lanes. 60% of those will be converted from existing lanes to managed truck lanes, and 40% will be new lanes. 5.3 of those miles are in the northbound direction, and the other 8.1 are in the southbound direction. The safety, as far as safety, they improve safety by removing most of the conflicts between trucks and the faster moving vehicles when you move the trucks over to the number 1 lane, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then when you move truck flow away from the interchanges, it also will help out with the merging weaving. Right now, we're anticipating these managed truck lanes to be placed in the left lane, what we'll call the number 1 lane. And the innovative part about this is that most of the time you see the trucks in the right lane, closest to the interchanges, closest to, that's where the slow traffic runs. And so we're talking about putting them over in the left lane. And that's the very innovative. We've been looking at it throughout California. There's not many places that we see that have done that, if any. And so this is something we're willing to try, and we think it will benefit this area by doing that. And again, like I said, through safety and other ways. The other part is it will, from the safety perspective, it decreases the speed differentials between the trucks and cars, because you have the trucks in their own lane and the cars in the other 2 lanes. As far as goods movement, it really optimizes the truck freight traffic throughput, and we'll talk more about that. And then as far as reducing greenhouse gases, because the speed differentials, with the trucks in their own lane, they will be in a steady flow, and without being in with the other cars, their acceleration, deceleration will change. In other words, they're at a steady flow. So that should help out the greenhouse gases. Also, by moving the trucks into the number 1 lane, it decreases the acceleration and deceleration. It decreases that of the cars and vehicles in those other 2 lanes. So that's a big benefit. And operational improvements, the slower moving trucks will be moved away from the interchanges. And so the weaving, merging conditions will help those out from an operational aspect. And in all this we've been talking about it, we'll be managing all this with the TMS elements. And I'll be showing you more about that in a second. This is very hard for you all to see. So this just quickly shows where our truck only lanes are, our managed truck lanes. This is the start of the northbound, and this is the end. Whoops. Oh, look at that. And I didn't even think I did that. So, and then as you go south, this is where the south starts, and then it ends down here. This is the Hartnell overcrossing. This one is right here. This is next to, or real close to, what we call the Hilltop overcrossing. Thank you. So I'm going to mention real quick, talk about the TMS elements. This is a rendering of a sign bridge where regulatory signs create an enforceable action if not followed. So the intent is to install live signs on these sign bridges so traffic operations can manage as conditions ahead change. Other TMS elements that we might use and are considering is multiple sign bridges that not only direct trucks but vehicles, and also take people to the detours as necessary. Changeable message signs to inform the traveling public what's going on, and variable speed limit signs, which will be, which is really new to the rural area, but we're looking at providing those will provide travelers with speed control for conditions ahead. Again, not knowing what's ahead, we're trying to manage on with live TMS elements. So moving on here, back to the managed truck lanes, as you have all heard, we have multiple events here, mostly climate events that close I-5. And the northbound, where we close I-5 as for northbound travelers, is at the Fondale interchange. And that's up right before you start up over the Pitt River Bridge and up into the hills. And the reason for the closures are various, but they go from snow, fire, flooding, crashes, and even hazardous waste spills. This year alone, we've had 18 closures. Up to this is the calendar year. Up to this point in time, 18. And we still have a summer to go through. Quite a few closures. Our goal here with the TMS elements is to first let those further south know that the road's closed, to encourage them to pull off somewhere, a truck stop, a rest area, some place to get food or wherever, so they're not stacked up on the highway. But we know that a lot of people don't follow that encouragement. So they end up here waiting, stopped on the I-5, and we'll show you a picture of that. And so our goal is to manage the trucks in that situation such that they're over in the left, the number 1 lane, and possibly or number 2 lane. And the intent there is that this number 3 lane, the one closest to the interchange, stays open. And it's so important that that happens. In the past, we've had cars, vehicles, travelers coming from other places that could not get to the interchanges, could not make it over to get food or stop at go to a restaurant or a lodging or fuel, whatever the case. And so the idea is to get those trucks over so that the people could use the interchanges, and also emergency vehicles can use the interchanges to get to I-5 and then get to where they need to go. So let me move on here. And also let me point out here the TMS elements inform and route people to the detours as necessary. This is that photo that I was telling you about here. This is looking north at the Oasis Road interchange. This interchange is 7 miles south of the Fondale interchange. And as you can all see, this interchange is blocked. You're not going anywhere. And in fact, these cars are at a standstill right here. They're not moving. So anybody here cannot get over to go to a rest area or whatever, a restaurant, lodging. And so it's very important that we think about how we manage these events. As Sean shared earlier, we have had backups all the way down here to Anderson, roughly 20 miles long. And then I was telling you about detours. The idea is to use the TMS elements for the detours. When I-5 is closed due to fires or events that do not close State Route 299 or 89, this is 299 and this is 89. traffic is detoured roughly 112 miles back to I-5 from here in the south to the north here. And that's right close to the city of Mount Shasta. Most all of the detour, of all that detour, is a 2-lane curvilinear alignment through mountainous terrain. It travels through, as many people could contest here, travels through communities where people are walking, crossing, bicycling. And then also, just to let you know, as was mentioned earlier, when we had the fires up the canyon, this detour was used. Those fires occur in the heavier times of the summer, and what we find is that that's when the heaviest traffic flows are, and it took some of those vehicles over 5 hours to make that detour, to traverse that detour. So pretty substantial. I'm moving on now to the auxiliary lanes part of this. When we plan to improve the goods movement and operations by adding auxiliary lanes between the 2 state route interchanges, with the anticipation of the Port of Humboldt Bay drawing more cargo to it, and that's the direction they are working towards. In our partnership with them, that's their goal, and that's where they're trying to move. These auxiliary lanes will facilitate the safe goods movement through the interchanges and to all directions, north, south, west, and east. The auxiliary lanes will also improve the safety of the merging and weaving movements trucks and vehicles experience going through those interchanges. Additionally, the auxiliary lanes will also provide and promote a more safe evacuation plan for the community when climate events occur, like the car fire. And I don't know if you heard, we had a car fire a number of years back where it was a lot of people are trying to get out of the area, and getting onto I-5, making that move was very tough. Moving on to the electric vehicle chargers. After doing some research, and there was many people that were helping out with that, we found out that medium heavy duty, that there are only 2 other places along the I-5 corridor for the medium heavy duty chargers. One in San Diego and one up in Portland. And so again, we're pretty close to the center there. You still have to get the trucks there, but the idea is to promote that. Installing these heavy-duty electric vehicle chargers will provide trucks with an opportunity to stop near the midpoint of their journey. Again, makes the assumption where they're going to. Caltrans is partnering with the CHP to install these chargers at the northbound Cottonwood Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Facility. And we believe that by installing these, again, it will help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, which is a priority for the region, and it's a step in that direction. Additionally, these chargers move this region one step closer to supporting Governor Newsom's executive order that by 2045, all medium heavy-duty vehicles sold have zero emissions where feasible. So. Again, these are 2 items that will help out. We know the network still needs to be built out and that trucks have to be in place, but that's a start. And then finally, let me move on here to increase the vertical clearance that we've talked about. The project will increase vertical clearance at that southbound I-5 and 273 northbound I-5 connector, and I'll show you a picture here in a minute. Currently, all height permit loads have to travel State Route 273 for 16 miles to avoid the location. Like I said, I have a map here that follows this. Tomorrow's planned tour will take you on that route, and you'll be able to see where those height permit loads travel. By removing this height permit load barrier, the benefits will be, not that it's a big deal, but every mile counts. Trucks will travel 3 miles less. It will improve, greenhouse gases will be reduced by a shorter trip, and also less stopping and starting because there's a number of signals along that route, and you'll see that tomorrow. It will improve safety of State Route 273 corridor by removing the permit loads, those conflicts with bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles. and it'll decrease the impact of the permit loads that the permit loads have on State Route 273, the structural section. The heavy loads, those big loads tear it apart. So this is that picture. Whoever has that magic to make that thing make bigger. There we go. So here's as we were traveling southbound, here's where that conflict is, that vertical clearance issue. And so trucks have to travel all the way down here to get back onto I-5. So that's one of the reasons I'm showing you this slide. That was the first reason, and as I'm trying to hurry up and close up. The second part of that is to show you the improvements that CERTA, Caltrans, and our partners have made over the recent years. And I won't point them all out, but the one thing I will point out here is this is the location for the Fix 5 Cascade Shop project. And along with that is a the Fix 5 Cascade project. And we also have a Cascade Shop project. It's another shop project that we're combining with it. Bringing those two together helps save money on both sides. And then in our 2024 shop plan, we have an East Palisades with a bike and ped path that we are moving forward and looking forward to completing that corridor in those terms. Oops. So funding, that's all part of all this, right? It's funding. You want to, and there's multiple colors of money that it takes to make this dream a reality. And so far we have funds on this. We have State Transportation Improvement Program funds, STIP funds, SHOP funds. We do have some TCIP, Trade Corridor Enhancement Program funds for the design phase. And we recently, our acronym for this is CRISA, but Coronavirus Response, you guys could read the rest. So quite a number of funding sources. Community project funds, we have applied for the Port Freight Improvement Program funds, and recently we received some infrastructure IIJA funds. And finally, all this is not doable without having multiple partners and supporters and stakeholders. And so this is just a quick list of some of the partners and stakeholders, finish up here, that we have. And they have been great partners and stakeholders. Together, Caltrans, District 2, CERTA, and others have partnered together to develop a transportation system that benefits all modes of travel. The Fix 5 project will improve safety and goods movement at the interchanges and throughout the project limits. 1, by moving freight traffic to the number 1 lane. 2, by improving operations by installing auxiliary lanes between state routes. And number 3, by decreasing the merge weave movements. The project will provide managed truck lanes that allow a steady flow of freight movers through the area to help reduce greenhouse gas. This project will provide traffic management system elements to optimize truck and car movements and direct vehicles to detour routes. The Fix 5 project will install electric vehicle chargers for medium heavy-duty trucks to reduce greenhouse gas, prepare for meeting Governor Newsom's 2045 zero-emission executive order, and provide freight movers with the opportunity to charge their vehicles before traveling to the North Cascades, west to the North Coast, or east to the inland communities and connecting routes. With that, any questions? I know it wasn't that great, but thank you.
All right, let's see here. Come on, one more. Oh, there we go. As advertised, we will take a 10-minute break. Actually, it'll be 11 minutes. If you could all be back here around 3, that would be great. Thank you. All righty then. Thank you all. And, we'll just start and have people come back. The next item is the Pitt River Bridge. Catherine Lowe, Caltrans District 2.
Oh, are you looking for me?
Don't sneak up on me like that. All right.
Thank you, John. Despite my outfit, I do not play golf. I am Catherine Lowe. Good afternoon, Chair Eager, commissioners. Thank you so much for coming up to Reading. We have people on the call as well. Thank you, Shasta Regional Transportation Agency, for having us. This project has some really unique challenges, and that's why it's so important that we talk about it today. Can I make it bigger? Yes. Thank you. So this project is just north of Derek's project that he just finished describing. So if you recall, there was a city of Shasta Lake identified on his map, and so this is just north of that. This is the route that all passenger vehicles, trucks, passenger rail, and freight rail use this bridge to access the I-5 corridor up to Oregon. So I am a structural engineer. I will not make this into a vector mechanics lecture, but I'm eyeing my boss to see how much I can geek out. So there's some really cool stuff I want you to pay attention to. So these are piers, and the clear distance between the piers is what we call a span, and that's important. This span here between these two uniquely shaped piers is the longest span for this bridge. It's 630 feet. That's an important number to remember, if you could keep that in mind. When you look at these piers, they all look basically the same from the top of the lake. They are uniquely different. The ones closer to the shore are actually not that tall. All the piers are very wide at the bottom, and they narrow as they come up. The ones here in the middle are very, very tall. And so they look a little bit different than the top of these because as they narrow, they have to stop them. So there's enough surface bearing area for the columns that support the bridge to land on. What else is notable is this is our highway. And then on the bottom floor is our railroad tracks. And the depth of the steel trusses is determined by the maximum span. So it looked like this no matter whether there was a highway on top or not, because of the distance it needs to span across the lake. This bridge was constructed by the United States Bureau of Reclamation. The superstructure was designed in accordance with the Steel Railway Bridges specifications, plus reference to the highway loads. We do have a perpetual easement for Caltrans for highway purposes, and we originally only needed one lane in each direction. The maintenance agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation ends 2040. Thank you. The top deck on the bridge is for highway. The floor of the bridge is for freight and passenger rail. Because the Bureau has no functional unit that focuses on bridges, in 2012 they came to Caltrans and they requested that we start investigating future studies for the life expectancy of the existing bridge. Caltrans has produced value analysis reports back in 2016 and technical memos on how to rehabilitate the existing bridge. Additional studies have been funded by the Central Federal Lands, which is part of the FHWA. First thing we did is we created a prioritized list of needed studies. 2021, we had our first assessment done by a consultant. Based on that assessment, we determined which advanced planning studies we needed to perform to rehabilitate the existing bridge, as well as start looking at what would a replacement bridge look like. We just completed a peer review. This was performed by the consultant HDR and COE. COE is a globally recognized bridge solutions design firm. They provided review of our advanced planning studies. They also provided additional long span solutions based on what they're seeing is the current construction practice. And the results of this study, along with all of the other work that Caltrans has done to date, will be included in the project initiation document, which we are completing soon. This is what the bridge looked like during construction. This is the original Highway 99 bridge. So Route I-5 used to be Highway 99, and it followed the Pitt River Canyon. So here you can see the height of those piers. This is what it looks like now. This is the bridges, or the lake level is a little bit higher now, but this is when it was down. What's notable is you can see we did widen the bridge, and these floor beams that support the highway deck were extended on each side. And that was the maximum we could widen the bridge at the time. The bridge was started construction in the late 1930s. It was completed in 1941. We also built a new alignment for Highway 99. This was the new highway. Caltrans entered into a 99-year maintenance agreement with the Bureau. A comparable bridge of the era, there was a 5,000-foot railroad bridge built across Suisun Bay in 1930, and the longest span for that was 530 feet. In 1953, Highway 99 becomes Federal Highway I-5. 1966, that highway is upgraded for modern traffic, and the bridge deck is widened by just over 10 feet. A comparable highway project of that era is the Venetia Martinez Bridge, and at the time we only had ferry service across that bay, so then it was a new highway bridge. Some of the deficiencies we have include geometric deficiencies. The curves on both approaches are 50-mile-an-hour curves. So those of you going on the tour tomorrow, you'll get to experience that. We do have maintenance challenges. In the photo, what you can see is traffic is moved into the lane 1 so that workers can access the exterior lane. So that means that we have to close one lane, so we only have one lane open during maintenance inspection. We also have worker safety issues due to lack of escape routes. More maintenance challenges are coordination with the railroad schedule. So the railroad has told us that we can work 20 to 40 minutes, but that when they say we need to leave the area, we need to leave immediately, and that's all of our tools as well. It's very difficult working conditions. What we've had to do when we had to replace the deck, the bridge, the concrete bridge deck, we actually had to build, this floor goes all the way across, and as we know, carpenters build bridges. They also build barriers so that we can continue to work in that area, even with the trains coming and going. Long-term lane closures, that's what we experienced during the concrete bridge deck replacement. So when we have to close the lane for days at a time, that causes long delays because we only have one lane open. Our structural deficiencies, this is the shoulder, and this is a bike route. Tubular bicycle railing is provided, but the shoulders are just over 2 feet. We do have increasing demand for goods movement, And the frequency of having to replace the concrete deck depends on the condition. This bridge was excluded from our statewide bridge program. The program retrofit all the seismically vulnerable bridges, but because this bridge is not an asset to Caltrans, we only have an easement and a maintenance agreement. It is owned by the Bureau. It has not been seismically upgraded. Modality deficiencies. Please note, this bridge does go through the National Recreation Area of the Forest Service. So we do have a need for recreating people moving through the area, but we also have unauthorized truck parking. Our Office of System Planning is urging to find truck parking opportunities. As you saw, we have bicyclist impediments and pedestrians are prohibited. Our modality deficiencies are compounded by our impractical detour options. As Derek described, this route can take about 5 hours. Part of that is because these routes are not intended for I-5 traffic. And depending on the climate, this one is where you get off for the ski park, and often you're following the snowplow. We do have some closures. We did experience, like Sean mentioned, the Delta fire, where the fire actually went across I-5 at this location. So we were closed for 5 days. And that was when you probably heard about people having to do this detour, and it impacted a lot of people. We have a lack of EV charging stations along this corridor. So as I mentioned, this project has funding challenges. This is not a Caltrans asset. However, we are operating a 4-lane highway on this bridge that was originally intended for 2 lanes. This project is eligible for federal aid funding. We have applied for grants, and we continue to do so. We did really well in our last round of grants application. However, we did not get awarded the grant, but we learned from it, and we're optimistic. We do need a mix of federal and state funds to cover the support and capital costs. And the support cost for the project approval and environmental documents is estimated $100 million to $150 million. So we are looking at what would it take to widen the existing bridge. And so it's hard to see here, but we could potentially build another set of trusses, steel trusses on the outside, so you keep the inside bridge and all that steel, and then you put another layer of steel trusses around that, and that gives you the opportunity to put a bridge deck that would meet our actual needs. So that's an option. And you can see that, I'm just gonna show you. So this is the current route. It's a little bit confusing. What we highlighted was the railroad. So they travel through tunnels on either end. Another idea, if we have to replace the bridge, is we would just have a highway-only bridge. The issue there is we do need to keep the foundations outside of the deepest part of the lake. And in order to do that, our spans, depending on what alignment works best, could be up to 3,000 plus feet long. And because that is such a big span, we're looking at a structure that's got the same type, the suspension type bridge, as Golden Gate Bridge, just slightly shorter. And then of course we have challenges because we don't have the back spans that the Golden Bridge has, and then we have tunnels going through here as well. So there's some challenges there. So once we obtain the funding to move into the next phase, we look forward to engaging with Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. We've listed a few of the people that we think we would engage with. as soon as we get the funding, but we can't do that without it. And I think my next one is that. Questions?
So you had, oh, sorry.
No, you're first.
You had said what you really need is a mixture of state and federal funds in order to get this done. Do you have an idea of what pot of money that state funding would come from?
The bridge is a federally owned
Right.
asset, so they own that asset. But if the part of the main purpose of the project is also improve the approaches to it. And Caltrans owns the approaches.
Excuse me. As I was saying, the bridge is a federal asset, and so we had anticipate the feds paying for the bridge, and that's a large part of this. But Caltrans does own the approaches, and we'll need to modify those to bring them up to standard, right? If you're going to do something here, you want to bring it up to standard. And so looking at the split, and this is very rough, it's about 88 to 12% split, 12% for the approaches. So I offer that. That would be the state. It just so happens that that is generally how our federal and state split is already. So that's just a coincidence.
And the railroad that uses the bridge, it's BNSF, did you say, or UP?
UPRR.
And they're not
Union
willing
Pacific
to
Railroad.
assist in helping to fund this? They're not talking to you?
Yeah, there's more to that. But from the railroad's perspective, because of the railroad is gaining grade to get up over the mountains there, and to change the grade to move them would be very tough. As Catherine already pointed out, there's multiple tunnels that they go through before and after. And so the railroad says, we'll use this, they'll use their bridge part. Caltrans, you go somewhere else. That's kind of how they're looking at it.
A real quick question. Because it's seismically deficient and it's federally owned, is there a sense of urgency to do something by the federal government to move and make this bridge safe for folks who use it?
So one of the studies that hasn't been done yet is the seismic evaluation.
And the feds have to do that, correct?
Yeah.
As just to add to that, yeah, it hasn't been seismically evaluated. The feds really don't have the expertise with the agencies that we're working with. So, we're trying to struggle through that to understand. Obviously, when we carry this forward, we want to carry a rehabilitative option forward. I mean, you're looking at a new standalone bridge, you're talking real big dollars there. So, we are looking at those options. So we have to analyze it to the extent to understand what that would be in that real rehabilitative option. Right now, we're completing basically the project study report to identify how much cost would be needed in the environmental phase to fully evaluate those types of issues, and working to try to get the feds to pay for that next phase of work. In terms of funding opportunities for this, there really is no funding source that fits this kind of project. And you see a handful of these across the state that are, mega projects that really take special funding efforts. IJA did provide some language in the bill that helps for potential funding of this in the future, but it just really isn't lined up yet to do there. So this is kind of an advanced preview. You asked about this, are the feds really excited and wanting to go forward with this? They obviously are getting that sense of urgency. We brought them along, and now they seem to have that sense of urgency. The bridge is 82 years old, and before you know it, it's going to be 100 years old, probably before this thing is funded and built. And so that's kind of the goal that the feds have, the goal that Caltrans has, is to come up with a solution and get us to the point that we can move forward into the future without carrying a 100-plus-year-old bridge on the inventory that has the issues that it has. Those 50-mile-an-hour curves on either end of the bridge, I think, are the most restrictive curves that we have on I-5 in the state. There's a couple other very similar curves, but we have shoulders where those 50-mile-an-hour curves there, and we really have no shoulders going in and out of that bridge effectively for any off-tracking or anything like that. So it's a situation we would like to get addressed, and obviously, the sooner the better.
There's a question right over there.
Yeah, sorry, I'll speak loudly, but I was just wondering if, so was it that are you still choosing between the new bridge and the remodeling, or are you sort of focusing on the new bridge, or are you still trying to decide whether it would be better to remodel the old one or the new one?
So we're moving all alternatives forward. We have a significant amount of engagement to do before we can make any determination like that.
I had one question. Can I ask you a quick question? Does the, there's been talk, as long as I've been in Shasta County, which is 1986, there's talk of raising the dam and creating some more water storage, and I know that's not popular with some, but is that part of the plan? Do we incorporate that into part of the plan for future so that we would build it to make that doable, or does the railroad hinder that at the moment? They seem to be the low man on the totem pole, no pun intended.
So as far as a rehabilitation option, we would need to know the water level like you would any time you design a bridge. For the replacement alternative, if we have to go that route, we would also have to know what the water level is going to be.
So a quick answer to that, that's part of what brought the Bureau to the table, is when they were looking at options of raising the dam, they had to factor in this existing bridge. They have a proposed solution to deal with a smaller dam raise that they were trying to carry forward, which cost millions of dollars to protect those two bearing plates on those two inside piers. We're not convinced that it's a great solution, but they do have that, and that's kind of what brought them to the table. Obviously, any new structure we were to take on, we would factor in that height in the planning of it to make sure that if they do raise the dam, it's not an obstacle. But it will be challenging for the, with that proposed dam raise, this was kind of the limiting factor on that height that they had chosen in their environmental studies. It really puts that highest water elevation literally just a couple feet below the tracks on one end of the structure.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one thing?
Well, of course you can.
So we have a lot of people online, including some of our commissioners, and if we're not talking on
Right.
the mic, they can't hear us. So
Yes.
Exactly right.
Right. All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I love old pictures. Let's see here. The next item is emergency evacuation planning and projects. Jessica Risk Gomez. You're not standing. No, they're not standing over there. Okay. Sneaky.
Hello, as he said, my name is Jessica Risky Gomez. I'm from the County of Tehama. We run the Tehama County Transportation Commission. And like many rural agencies, we rely heavily on consultants for delivery. Want to introduce my consultant today, Jeff Schwein of Green Dot Transportation Solutions. He has been contracted to work on our project, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my presentation over to him. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So my name is Jeff Schwein, transportation consultant. My company's down in Chico. We work, live, and play in the North State. And so really happy that you're here. Welcome. We appreciate the attention, honestly, on kind of behalf of all the rural counties. So this is really important. I want to show you today the connection between things like emergency evacuation and transportation funding that the Commission is responsible for, and hopefully point out some really interesting things about rural communities, like we have communities with 20 people in them that have a loud voice in a project like this because of our community engagement efforts. I'm glad Christine talked about engagement because it is a critical factor when we're making decisions. So this project is funded by a Caltrans planning grant, by a CAL FIRE grant, and the Office of Emergency Services funding. So we cobbled together 3 funding resources to help Tehama County be prepared for the future. We've all seen catastrophic fires over the last 5-10 years. They're getting worse. We know we need to plan for them. So we take our cues and clues and information from what's happened in the past, and we try to look toward the future. And that's how we're doing this. So first, we analyze the existing conditions throughout the whole county. We talk to the communities. What's going on with you? Where do you not feel safe? Where would you evacuate if you had to? And we are looking at 3 primary means and reasons for evacuations. There's more, but for this study, we're focusing on wildland fire, flooding, and contaminant spills. Mainly focused on the rail corridor that runs through Tehama County, but Interstate 5 also carries a lot of things that you don't want spilling. So right now we're in the community engagement portion of this project. We are currently, like tomorrow night, we're in the process of 13 roadshow community meetings. So we're going to all areas of the county, talking to the communities. Mainly we focused and kind of compiled these areas that are vulnerable communities. So we went through a ranking system and developed a reason, a foundation for them being vulnerable. And I'll talk through just a couple of those because they're kind of important. And we're going to each of these communities and talking to them about their needs and their concerns. We're using a couple of really critical tools here. Luckily, technology, the industry standards have gotten to a really high level, and we have great tools to work with. The problem is not everyone's using them. So we're trying to implement tools in Tehama County that can show that, hey, rural counties can be really progressive in our planning, and this is the way we're doing it. So using mapping tools, we're taking previous fire data from incidents that have happened throughout the county. Our fire behavior specialists can understand what might happen to a community based on previous fire nearby, or where we could stop a fire using those previous fire burn scars. So super important. We use ArcGIS online, and it's a powerful tool to help us tell the story to the community. So part of these planning projects is telling the story is critical, not just to the agencies or to our partners, but to the community members. And part of that is hopefully people can understand maps, and that's a visual clue, but we also give them data and foundation to make decisions. One really cool thing about technology too is that currently Tehama County utilizes pretty low-level means of communication. A lot of times it works. If the sheriff office gets a call, there's an incident, they know who to call and what to do. They use some media and things like that in severe emergency situations, a reverse 911 call. But there's other tools out there. One of them we're using is called Zone Haven, and basically it's a electronic tool that can put all different types of alerts out. It can do a reverse 911. It can be from somebody who's signed up or gets online looking for where to go. But we can't rely on these completely. So there's a difference between the technologically sound tools that we use and the tools that these communities really need. So a couple examples. We went to Pesquinta, talked to some folks there. They said, well, during the last fire, all the power went out. We didn't have any tools. We couldn't use them. So I'm like, well, what could we do? And honestly, they said there's an old siren up on the fire building that isn't in use anymore, but we could all hear that. Everybody could hear it. We would know. And so, the talk is then, well, do we use sirens? Like, that's a pretty old school method, but you know what? It really works. The other thing was, why don't you call Jean? She has the entire community's phone list and calls us all 20 times a day anyways, and she could get the word out in like 20 minutes. And so we're like, oh gosh, okay, something we didn't really think about. But some of those low-tech things are pretty important. And so it was really kind of eye-opening to us. The rest of the communities we talked to said, we want a siren, we want a siren. So anyways, probably a lot lower cost than some of the other remedies and mitigation measures. But yeah, it was really cool to talk to them about it. So when we're developing projects, and this is where, you make a plan, and then the project lists pour down from that. So we are going to have project lists, and these will be transportation projects, and they will be funded with the resources that we all know. So we are talking about intersection operations improvements for evacuation purposes. We're talking about secondary access roads that can improve the health and safety of the communities that we're working in. We're talking about little connections. Oh, there's a cul-de-sac, but right on the other side, there's another road over there that should have the developers come in at the very beginning, or the agency plan for this, and it's been hard to, but maybe we pop a road through there and make it a connected community. So super important stuff. Also some design improvements. So a lot of rural communities have one way in, one way out. It's a 2-lane road, no shoulders, nowhere for emergency vehicles to go. And we're learning from this, okay? And part of the design solutions for things like this are to widen it up, make sure you have enough space for 2 egresses and 1 ingress. Emergency vehicles getting in, 2 lanes of traffic getting out. Super important, kind of costly in rural areas because we have long roads and we have the environmental concerns that most projects do and the space limitations, but these projects can be engineered to work. So when we go to project prioritization, we have to make sure that we're thinking about doing all the projects. So we get a project list. These are all important. And you can't just go in and do them all at one time. So what we look at when we're prioritizing projects is a feasibility factor, an environmental factor, a funding factor, all these different factors that can help us say, well, we could probably build this smaller project in the next couple of years with the funding that we have available, and we're planning for the 20-year project that is, a bridge over the Sacramento River or something like that. That's a much longer term project, but we're laying the foundation and we're developing those projects all the way along. So the term low-hanging fruit, I don't like it, but it's really important. If you implement a technology solution like Zone Haven for evacuation alerts, super important and critical. Also, we're doing some things like educational campaigns. We've learned that visual clues from people in distress, trying to evacuate, trying to escape, they're scared. Small signs, something that says, oh my gosh, I forgot where I was supposed to go, but I see that little red icon on the side of the road with an arrow. Sometimes it's super simple, so we're trying to come up with some simple solutions that help people understand what their behavior should be in relation to what's going on around them. So funding, these projects cost a lot of money. We're digging into all the funding sources. The real important thing is that there's money coming, and Tehama County is kind of really progressive in the fact that they recognize that. They're trying to be prepared, and having this plan in place can help them attack the funding resources, the projects that we're developing, the planning that we're doing, the community outreach that we're doing, all creates really strong foundations for grant applications. So hopefully in the future, Tehama County, all the other rurals that have these same challenges are able to tap into some of the really robust funding resources that are coming our way. So that's about it. Also, I wanted to kind of tie it back into some of the concerns that we've talked about today, which is, we're all trying to work in a landscape that's challenging. Rural communities, we live here, we work here for a reason, because we like it. And a lot of the folks that I interact with when I'm doing community outreach, they have concerns, but they're not going to move. and a lot of times I want to say, well, you live here for a reason, but it was their choice, and they're just trying to do the best they can. So when we talk to them, we can really kind of bring it down to a tangible and just relatable personal feeling for them, and say, hey, listen, we're going to do the best we can to get you money. You do the best you can to live in a wild area. So that thread is pretty true with my rural constituents, and I really appreciate the time today, and Jessica and I are here for questions. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. So you said you get funds from Caltrans
Yes.
right now to do some of the planning? What kind of funds are you getting from them?
It's the Sustainable Communities Planning Grants. Really helpful resource for rural agencies, for all agencies probably. Thanks.
Are there any more questions for Jeff or Jessica? Yvonne just comes bull rushing up here anyway. Settle down, big boy. All right. Let's see. We are now going to have a presentation on the Town of Paradise Recovery. Yvonne Garcia, Butte County Association of Governments, and, oh gosh, Mark Matos? Matos? Oh, okay. Very good. Town of Paradise. Did that without my glasses.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Yvonne Garcia with the Butte County Association of Governments. I wanted to say a few things of what's going on in Butte County before Mark Maddox with the Town of Paradise goes over his what's going on with the rebuilding efforts. First thing is the completion of the Highway 70 corridor is coming to fruition. We are, well, sorry, I use we loosely. Caltrans District 3 is working on the last segments between Orville and Marysville. And correct me if I'm wrong, Amarjeet, that's what, close to $1 billion in connecting Chico to Sacramento. And Chico was, or still is technically, the largest urbanized area in California not served by the state's continuous four-lane highway system. And that originates from the CTC's 1988 blueprint. So that's, it's a blessing to see that in fruition. And if you drove up this way through Highway 70, you can see all the fine work that's being done by the district. Regarding transit, we recognize building and expanding our highways is not the one-size-fits-all solution to everyday trips. BCAG also owns and operates Butte Regional Transit Back in 2005, we consolidated the fragmented systems and brought them under the BCAG umbrella. We are always looking to improve that system. We're currently in a study looking at microtransit and some other innovative ways to improve ridership and service to the public. We are currently working on our first purchase of 2 electric buses. That's currently underway. But right before we do that, we need to make sure all those prerequisites are done. Can we even charge them? So the construction of the charging facility, the maintenance, the parts, the training and whatnot. When we consolidated and brought everything under BCAG, we streamlined everything to clean diesel. So now our transit operator, they're in the midst of that, of training and getting up to speed. But also, where do we use those buses? With the limited range, how do we charge them, which route? So a lot of details, and that's something that we dove into right now. It's a big learning curve and one that we'll work through. A concern is the cost of these electric buses. We just went from $600,000 for a 40-foot clean diesel to $1.2 million. That money has to come from somewhere. So having unfunded mandates, it stings. Regarding ATP, the Active Transportation Program, that is a source of funds that rurals can compete. As a region, we've been very fortunate in cycle 6. I think we've secured 4 projects. It's either 42 or 48 million. And between cycles 1 through 6, I think we're knocking on 98 million. So we're doing pretty good there. One thing that I do want to bring to you and ask you all really is, what can we do as a North State to continue that advocacy for more funding? Like Commissioner Alvarado, we need that $1 billion, we need that infusion, we got it. But look how competitive that was. And I remember Lori Waters saying, absent that infusion, those scores for funding would have been, 95? Without that funds. So this audience here, without that funding, do we go after that or not? Because of the effort and the limited resources we have as a rural agency. In rural, I think we're probably one of the bigger ones here with a staff of 11 and run transit. So it's difficult. So whatever suggestions you all have on what we can do on our side, please let us know. Regarding passenger rail, we have an exciting new effort for us is passenger rail. We've embarked on what we are calling the North Valley Rail Project to bring passenger rail service northward from the Natomas area in Sacramento to the city of Chico, and we'll go by Plumas Lake in Yuba County, Marysville, then over to Gridley and on to Chico. The North Valley Rail would extend the Altamont Corridor Express and Amtrak San Joaquin's north of Sacramento to better integrate the region into the statewide rail network, including the future high-speed rail system. If we can pull this off, I think it opens the door to bring passenger rail to Reading and anywhere else the state wants to go, to Oregon and Washington. So we are very excited for that. We do have funding challenges, and I do want to bring something that's been important to BCAG, and that is the lack of funding to develop projects. We have funds for planning, right? All sorts of planning grants out there, and then we have competitive grant fund opportunities that we can also go. It's that middle piece. How do we do the project study report or the project initiation documents to really scope and vet out a project? We have PPM funds through the STIP, but it's not enough. And we're unable to use STIP funds for that purpose. The STIP, you can do environmental design right-of-way construction, but you can't do that PSR or PID. And we need that seed money in order to step into the arena and go after the grant funding. Sitting in the peanut gallery at your commission meetings, what do we see at every commission meeting? Cost increases, scope change, delays, and whatnot. Can we do better? Probably. But anyway, that's a challenge area for us. We are an MPO. We do get federal planning funds, but we can't do that type of work with planning funds. My comments provided at Union Station in Los Angeles, and I wasn't the guy with the vest or the dog. That was, if you were there, you know what I mean. If you don't, that's okay. That wasn't me.
That was Joe's first meeting. I'm not saying there's any relation or anything like that. That's just totally.
Let's just say we won't forget that one. Anyway, my comments were regarding the priority areas in Caltrans's SHSMP for climate adaptation and resiliency priorities. I expressed concerns that non-coastal priorities are excluded. And it is emergency evacuation in which the context of those comments come from, and Mark will bring it home. We have a lot going on in Butte, but really want to focus on what's going on with Rebuilding Paradise, which was BCAG's second largest community. And in the next room, or when they open this up, I brought a couple plots, and I superimposed the geographic boundary of the Paradise Campfire over other known areas in the Bay Area, Oakland, LA, San Diego, and I think Sacramento, to give you perspective in the magnitude of size. The other plot is on our Orville Dam crisis, and you know, the destruction there, and the inundation area that shows flooding all the way from I-5 pretty much to Sacramento. So it puts it in perspective, because the distance there is about 70 to 90 miles of gridlock. And on Paradise, we saw our build-out road conditions play out in real time, no traffic modeling needed. 50 to 60,000 residents were displaced in one day. And what was obvious is we need operational improvements in some areas and basic capacity increasing projects in other areas where it made sense amongst other emergency preparedness projects. With that, I'd like to include Mark Maddox with the Town of Paradise and the rebuilding efforts. And if your area has been hit hard by a disaster like this, you really want to pay attention to his presentation. And if anybody tries to take him from Butte region, watch out. Watch out. Just saying, you've been warned.
Thank you, Yvonne. Well, again, yeah, thank you. My name is Mark Maddox. I'm the Public Works Director and Town Engineer for the Town of Paradise, and I obviously want to say thank you to the Commission for your interest in the region. Thank you for your interest in the Butte County, and of course, Paradise as well. I'm going to try and make up some time, Yvonne. Thank you for taking up a little bit more. So I'm going to try and go slow enough for you guys to hear what I say, but fast enough to catch us up. So what happened with the 2018 campfire? But let me tell you about kind of this presentation, about how we are going to leverage $25,000 to $360 million. That's a pretty good hook. So let's give it a go. All right, so the campfire, Yvonne really laid the groundwork very well. The most destructive wildfire in California history, the globe's most expensive disaster in 2018, at least 85 fatalities, 153,000 acres burned, 18,000 structures destroyed, most of which occurred in the first 12 hours. And Paradise lost 90 to 95% of all structures, including my own home. So with that, our population was reduced to 27,000, from 27,000 to 4,000 overnight. So responding to something like that comes with a lot of shock, and certainly us as staff with the Town of Paradise, we were not immune. We were really trying to figure out a path forward, but we knew there was infrastructure damage that we had seen and some to come, and I'm going to touch on that. But we had damage to our roads, our culverts, our hardscape, guardrails, trees, our entire tax base for the Town of Paradise community as a jurisdiction completely gone overnight. So financial solvency was a deep concern. Of course, we have the wonderful infrastructure recovery arms in government at work, in FEMA, Cal OES, FHWA, and Caltrans. You know, a lot of great resources mobilized very quickly. But there's still a lot of things that don't fit in a perfect disaster response equation. And certainly the campfire in for Paradise and how big this was, we were not able to kind of see that path and know the things we didn't know quite yet. So looking forward about damage still to come, we had debris removal scheduled for 11,200 structures in town limits. We had tree removal associated with utility, local, state, and federal programs, easily over 500,000 trees, probably 3/4 of a billion, right? 750,000 trees removed probably at this point in the region. So enter kind of the Butte Strong Fund and how I want to talk about kind of unexpected help from places you never thought would come. The Butte Strong Fund was established in partnership with the North Valley Community Foundation, with Sierra Nevada Brewery, and the Aaron Rodgers Fire Recovery Fund. In addition, it's also backed by a bunch of amazing organizations that really kind of funneled a lot of effort to look at long-term recovery as something that lives beyond the immediate response. The North Valley Community Foundation has done amazing work in housing, children and youth, health and wellness, education, community development. They've raised well over $72 million, and I think they're well past $60 million granted here 4.5 years later. But how this ties in is we were getting ready to start debris removal. We had the pleasure of having mutual aid resources from Santa Rosa with some of their lessons learned about, hey, you need to look at your pavement and know about what's happened and what's to come. And again, I mentioned us as a town and employees were going, do we have jobs in 6 months from now? So the kind of direction was, how can we get funding from places that we need it from, or places that aren't kind of traditional? So we had heard of this van through a company called ARB that does laser data collection for pavement surveys, and that van happened to be in California. We didn't have time for a normal procurement process or even know where to look to go elsewhere. So with that, we approached the North Valley Community Foundation for a $25,000 grant to pay ARB for the first of 2 data collection cycles. And the existing relationships, and kind of my advice for other communities, in addition to the wonderful work that Tama County is doing, is leveraging relationships with your nonprofit partners in advance of a disaster, because that relationship for the town to come forward to the North Valley Community Foundation, talk about bringing a van with lasers to do pavement surveys while we have tents in the Walmart parking lot, we have tens of thousands of people displaced. That's a pretty big ask of them, but they were able to come through and support the town doing that data collection cycle. So here's that van. The lasers are equipped on the back, and it's essentially driving data, which is incredible. And they had 5 digital cameras and a laser system measuring Google Maps-based imagery, deflection, bowls and slopes, cracking, rutting, roughness, pavement distress, and friction levels. 10,000 unique measurements on the town's 100 miles of roadways. So when the debris removal operations actually started, we had 3.7 million tons removed, 28.2 million road miles were traveled, 305,000 loads, 59 round trips to the moon. And so although debris removal operations was still ongoing, we were required through FHWA and FEMA really to do that second data collection cycle only 9 months into the recovery. So we did both. And this is kind of the Google Maps view, and I know it's kind of hard to see, but you can see this is the before and the after just 9 months later. And so some roads that needed some work just got a lot worse, but even our good roads got a lot worse, and we had the data to back that up. And this is kind of some of the visual and tabular data that we were able to look at on certain roads in town where you could see the level of cracking and then see the transformation in such a short amount of time. From there, we were able to hire a phenomenal team to support the town in our recovery efforts here and do the analysis and use that critical data by analyzing quantifying the percent change along each of the roadway corridors for 2 primary factors, one being surface area cracking and pavement rutting and deflection. So we use that data to help populate the damage assessment forms for both FHWA and FEMA for the public assistance. So with that data, we were able to secure the first 100 million. So we're almost there to the 300, right? And with that, we had on-system roads approved through Caltrans, FHWA, and the ER program, and then the off-systems through FEMA public assistance, with dig-outs, overlays, mill and fill, and full-depth reclamation planned. So from here, being the first priority is restoring the roads and doing emergency repairs. It allowed the town, being that this was taken care of, what can we do to be better? Because the community's expectations after something like this is not just pave it back the way it was, right? So now we can move forward because of that initial grant and start trying to move forward in resiliency efforts. So enter EDA, Economic Development Agency of all federal entities to support the town for a transportation master plan grant, a $1.8 million effort that really tagged on to what we started with also the North Valley Community Foundation to our long-term recovery plan. And in that long-term recovery plan, we looked at safer, improving evacuation routes, establishing an interconnected path system, resolving long dead-end streets, and undergrounding utilities. So with that, we were able to do kind of an overall very robust process, very similar to what was previously discussed, doing those workshops, the technical analysis to support it, the regional coordination, the surveys, and that output really gave us about 50 unique projects that could be done here in town just alone, but also help scope those big regional projects that would be benefit in a future campfire scenario. We found that we had a total of about $600 million in unfunded infrastructure projects. Those types of projects included installation of unobstructed safety turn lanes, which also increases evacuation capacity. One thing the town did before the fire was train our community to drive and center two-way left turn lanes in the event of emergency. But our community also was excited about the prospect of additional walking paths, and this is where the commission comes in the active transportation program, because this picture right here is from an ATP Cycle 2 project that was delayed by the fire. It might be Cycle 3, sorry, don't quote me on that. But we realized that multi-use pathways can be evacuation assets. I'm not going to call it a route or a lane because each individual threat is going to have its own unique needs. But I can tell you, in Paradise, our existing memorial pathway that runs through the town saved lives. It absolutely did. Somebody actually had to break down a fence and get people out to this path that got them out to a road, which is pretty incredible. So the fact that our community wants to see more active transportation in Paradise that happens to help increase evacuation assets is just really a win-win-win. So really excited about that. We're able to train and demonstrate this here in front of, this is Paradise Ridge Elementary School, but we're also looking at other types of projects connecting dead-end roads, increasing circulation with new connections, and again, installing more of these. So now kind of the next step is the CDBG-DR infrastructure funding. Now, I don't recommend becoming an eligible applicant for CDBG-DR funding, but if you do, please find a way to take advantage of it because it is very, very unique. We're excited to embark on this process with HUD and HCD, but there was a $317 million allocation for the 2018 Camp Fire, the 4407 disaster, so actually Shasta County, Reading, eligible applicants through that as well. And so we were able to submit 60 of our projects totaling $800 million as far as unmet needs for the town of Paradise in our recovery. And last August, we were really excited to receive about $200 million of that, which is obviously an incredible investment into the complete transformation of our community as we know it. A $200 million, let alone $300 million investment pre-fire certainly would not be on the table. But here we are. It's our job to move forward and make Paradise better, and we're so grateful and excited to do that. But now getting back to ATP funding Cycle 6, the CTC also had a role in kind of helping us move forward those other priorities. So in our statewide component, we did well with our Penn Student Pathway, which that picture I showed you earlier is phase 1. So this is phase 2, and really going to complete a 4.5-mile Class 1 facility that is going to double as an evacuation asset. Then in our small urban and rural components, our Neal Gateway project and Skyway Link projects were funded, and those are going to be also including pathways that leverage evacuation capacity. But 99.99% of the time, they're going to be used for a community essential function and service and infrastructure to support housing and rebuild and all of that good stuff. So it's really exciting to have this investment into Paradise and our recovery to support the rebuild. So now getting back to it, kind of if we start the initial 25,000, it looks like, you know, Paradise is on its own. We certainly did not do this on our own and couldn't have done without, you know, everyone listed here and beyond and beyond and beyond. But it is all connected, and especially from the community perspective about what they need to see in response to something like this. So with that, I can highlight just a few additional resiliency needs. It was great to see the Protect program through USDOT being highlighted earlier. That's certainly something we're looking at. From a regional perspective, again, we have to look beyond our jurisdictional boundaries, beyond our county boundaries to talk about when there's a mass evacuation, what are the things that actually can keep people moving? Even if it's not just to the destination they want to go, let's get them moving out of harm's way. So for us, that's projects like our Southgate interchange in the city of Chico on State Route 99, additional connections to State Route 191 for the Row Road extension projects, as well as the shoulder widening that's ongoing for State Route 191, which is great. Again, some closing notes on leveraging from experience, working together, accepting help, do that, identify kind of the best and highest use of a given resource, maximize efficiency, analyzing risks and definitely taking some. You know, not having certainty on reimbursement is a really important question, but you definitely find yourselves in positions where you just have to keep going, do the right thing, do the next right thing until you find it. And then making decisions quickly, make mistakes and learn from them. And then again, build relationships before disasters. So what else is happening in Paradise? My closing slide, thank you so much, is we are undergrounding all utilities townwide. So that's telecommunications, electric distribution systems in Paradise. We're about overall 50% complete, hoping for 2025. We're kicking off the design build of the Paradise Sewer Project, which I could spend a whole nother presentation on, which I will not do. But we were the largest community by population wholly on septic systems west of the Mississippi. So we're looking at a regional connection. It's this common theme. We have to work together, whether it's wastewater or evacuation, we're stronger together. So our project is to bring wastewater from the sewer service area all the way to the city of Chico's water pollution control plant. We have a full certified EIR. We have a contract with the city of Chico and funding for design build, which is great, or at least design at this point. Getting close, unless the commission has governance over wastewater as well. No? Okay, perfect. Sounds good. I'll find you after. So we're also doing our early warning sirens. I loved hearing Jeff talk about sirens. We have 21 towers, 10 foundations are dug this week and last week. The first tower is supposed to go up in a couple of weeks, which is fantastic. Those are independent of the grid, although they have power, they have battery backup, solar, GPS, all the stuff. And they're gonna look like trees. It's amazing. So excited about that. We're also doing the private work as well on the defensible space projects on the public and private land. We've adopted IBHS wildfire prepared home standards. So there's California Building Code, then there's WUI, right? And I'm sure the region is fully aware. Then there's IBHS wildfire prepared home. So we're going WUI plus and adopting those as code in all of our rebuilds, which in aggregate, in all of these things we're doing, there are science studies that say what we're doing can help reduce wildfire destruction by 70 to 75%. With that, our rebuild activity in my closing notes, we have over 3,000 applications in, over 2,000 homes rebuilt and bringing people home to Paradise, back home, but then also to home for the first time, which is really incredible to meet those people who are choosing Paradise. And again, finding a place to live is that personal choice, and there's threats all over, right? There's no community in California that doesn't have some sort of multi-hazard mitigation plan that says there are risks, but we choose these places to live because they are valuable to us. And so helping and being a partner with all of the entities here to make it as safe as absolutely possible is such a unique opportunity. I'm so grateful for the role of the commission, Caltrans, District 3. It's really been a pleasure, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
You might have answered this, I might have missed it. Here.
Yes, yes.
What percentage of the population that lost their homes moved back to Paradise?
So it's an ongoing formula. There's a lot of people who, in our first rebuilders, probably 90% of the rebuilders were coming home, and they never had a doubt, right? And then we're in this kind of new phase of what we do now really matters, and there's still a lot of interim housing solutions. But we see kind of this mix of almost 50-50 of people that are coming home versus new homes in Paradise or first-time home buyers here in the town. But as far as the percent returned, again, we are about 11,000 residential structures, and so we're probably somewhere up there close to 3,000 when you combine structures that remained after the fire and rebuilt. Any other questions? No. Microphone, please.
Comment, question for staff, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my question's for staff or for you, but when you put up the ATP project and the fact that that serves also as an evacuation emergency route for vehicles, I'm wondering, and I don't remember because I don't know if it's in our guidelines or not, do you get extra points for being able to solve two problems with one project? Or is ATP?
I don't think so, but I like where this is going.
Well, right. I mean, you know.
We have a hard time getting ATP.
Everyone has a hard time getting ATP,
Yeah.
but I don't remember whether our guidelines include, like, you know, hey, you're doing more than just providing a class 1 bike path. You're
Right.
actually saving lives with this project.
Yep.
Anyone? Laura or Tanisha? Do you guys remember? Teresa. Oh, Teresa's there. Yeah.
There's a
Well-
big component in the ATP program that is safety.
Okay. So that would fall under
yes,
safety.
So that would fall under safety. It would,
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. Good to know.
But the specific guidelines, I will probably
Yeah, you have to reread them like I would.
Yes.
Yes, I get that. Okay, thank you.
So I have something piggyback on Joe here that I was exactly thinking about the life safety element of this and not putting him on the spot, but leaning on staff for some education. Maybe later, Tanisha and Teresa or whoever may be able to cover this. But looking at I'm just going to use broad terms, that gap that Mr. Garcia was talking about. You get so far in the planning, engineering, but that you don't have access to funds. Can you work on illuminating us on where we might be able to play a role on that, or even to come up with suggestions as the commission moves forward? And I apologize, Ms. Lowe, I missed part of your presentation on the bridge, but similarly, I know it's a federally owned bridge, but again, you know, we've talked about it before at the commission. This is a classic example because it's too late in a lot of ways, but the cost when maintenance is delayed and we haven't been able to figure it out yet, and staff is fantastic at the commission. I'd argue they're the best of any agency in the state. I'm happy to say that. But that what that actual cost is year over year. But I don't know if there's a role we can play as well on some of the challenges there. I mean, that's a big deal, Caltrans, the feds, everything, but just wanted to raise those two, and maybe you could help guide us in some directions. Or you might know, Tanisha probably knows off the top of her head. So,
I don't know
thank
everything,
you.
so we will have to follow up on a couple of things, like the questions about the cost for the year-over-year maintenance. Some of that we do see when the projects come into the commission itself, and we can highlight those things when we see that and how they're increasing over time. Some of the cost overruns or some of the maintenance cost and the utilities, or not the utilities, but the materials costs going up with inflation. But in terms of the gap for the PID and the PSR funding, or the project initiation document and project study report. One of the things that we have talked about previously at the commission, and we can continue to advocate for, is resources for Caltrans in their budget to do that kind of work to help support some of the regional agencies that are looking for these things. That's something that we can talk about as a recommendation for our annual report, or some of those other places that make some sense for us.
Just real quick, let me just commend you and your team and everybody else who's involved in this whole rebuild effort. Obviously, it was a shock to see, that fire and the disaster unfold. And it's great to see how the town is rebuilding and building back better, stronger. That said, I have a keen interest in seeing some like technological advancements as far as building standards and materials and things like that. Has that come into play as far as on the utility side and adopting new building standards to be more resilient as far as the structures that you guys are putting back in place?
Sure. So on the utility side, we've adopted code and requirement for all rebuilt structures to have their service laterals undergrounded as well. So as we transition and all the poles come down, we're going to be, certainly hardened from a ignition perspective, and then also hardened from a, these wooden utility poles are a hazard and were a hazard in our evacuation falling into roadways. So from the utilities perspective, we're going to be really, really strong moving forward here by the end of 2025. From a residential construction materials perspective, again, with those WUI plus code requirements, whether we have defensible space, you can't have anything combustible within a 5-foot sphere of any part of your structure or any structures on your property. We're doing very proactive and aggressive code enforcement requirements that kind of go on top of that to make sure what we start with is maintained along the way. So again, all of those efforts combined really do make, from a data perspective, a huge difference on the resiliency of an individual home. Yep.
I do have a quick comment for Ivan.
Oh.
That you asked about ATP, and we can tell you from a commissioner standpoint, we will continue to advocate for more and more funding in ATP. That hasn't stopped. We continue to work with the legislature and the governor's office to ensure that more and more funding comes in so that people across the state are able to compete. Because we knew from before that there were large cities with regions that had 60 and 70 and 150 staff, right, that were doing really well. But I would encourage you to do exactly what you're doing. First, work with the CTC staff, because they're wonderful about working with you all about here's what you could do to beef up your proposals. The second suggestion would be, there's another region south of here that they all work together and they read each other's proposals and they rate them before they ever come to Caltrans or come to us. And even though they're competing, they rate each other and say, gosh, if you put this in there, you could do a little better. And guess what? They do the best in the state because it's really good before it ever even gets here. So they'll probably be mad that I shared their secret, but.
No, we do that, but when we hear absent that infusion of funds, expect if the same magnitude of projects come forward, the cutoff would have been a 95. And so rural regions have to ask themselves, is it worth the time and effort and limited resources to try to throw that dart and hit a 95 or better?
Well, we'll continue to put more money in there.
As we are.
So don't worry about that piece. We'll continue to do that. The other question I had was on the North Valley Rail system.
Yes.
So where are you in that process, and what's the funding needs for that?
We're in the planning, and we're using CRISA funds and some other, I think, LTF funds through TDA. If I have more information with me I can share with you. But, it's that seed money with the infusion of those CRISA funds. Right. We jumped on that opportunity, and we're fortunate that we have Union Pacific doing our modeling for us. So there were players, and they were appreciative that we approached them before we even started. Because according to them, it's always after the fact.
So our state railroad plan came up last meeting, right? I'm assuming this is in there. I don't remember it specifically. Can we check to make sure?
I think so.
Okay. Check to make sure. And we didn't finalize that, right? We were seeing the draft. So if it isn't in there, we still have time to put it in.
I think it is, because I think I approached the person who presented and asked them that very question.
Well, we'll just double check to make sure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I have a quick one. Sorry, Mr. Maddox. I'm sorry, and yeah, it's all good. You can use this mic. It's the people's mic. It just got me thinking about a couple things. I don't mean to come off controversial, but how has your experience been with working with PG&E?
Oh, gosh.
This commissioner finds they have serious capacity problems and more than just, right,
Sure,
workforce
yeah.
ability, prevention, but again, not trying to drag in a controversial thing, but just
It's okay.
how has that been?
Yeah, so that is a very difficult question to answer of all the things I thought you might ask. That's pretty low on that list. But, you know, I think for a community that's gone through what we have with PG&E, obviously there was a determination on fault. There's been settlements. There's been a lot of activity with the trust. And so there's a lot of hurt involved in that. And I certainly don't want to minimize any of it. With that said, on the rebuild side, if we take what has happened as in the past, moving forward, I don't think we could have asked for something better than what they've done to invest in our community and help rebuild and underground the utilities. That proactive choice is huge from a resiliency perspective, which I highlighted earlier, but also the amount of workforce and the local economy benefits that the community is seeing, especially we're in this transition period. We have a daytime population that comes into Paradise over 5,000 people per day just to work. And we have traffic counts that prove that. So I don't know how it could be going better from a lot of different angles, including the rebuild activity, but also the partnership in recovery. So that's kind of the best way I can put it. And it's been great, and we're so thankful that our telecom partners as well agreed to join the trench. And so the goal is, on the delivery model for the FEMA and the ER funding, is to get these trenches done, dig once, right, and pave and be done and go forward. And I'm sure like many communities in California would be really eager for that opportunity to pave every public road mile with underground utilities going ahead of it. So without PG&E's investment in that choice, I don't know how much that would be possible. So, yeah.
Well, good. I appreciate that you're having a good experience.
Yep.
This is total just opinion time, but hopefully where PG&E runs into capacity issues, it doesn't take damage, loss of life, or lawsuits for them to cover the work.
Absolutely.
That's just a statement from this individual commissioner, but I'm glad you're having a good experience there for obvious reasons.
Great. Thank you. All right.
All righty. Okay, so we have our last presentation before concluding remarks, and then the reception. So the Reading Regional Airport, Jim Wadley, Reading Regional Airport Manager. Okay. Thank you. Sure.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners and North State Super. My name is Jim Wadley. I'm the Airports Manager for the City of Reading. It's my first time in front of a group like this. This is pretty vast. It's pretty incredible. A lot of good projects and some good stories. But I'm excited to be before you and talk about a little bit about my industry and what's happening with Reading Regional Airport in particular. Reading owns the Benton Field as well, but I want to focus today on the successes and the challenges of Reading Regional Airport as an air carrier airport. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the air service that had a lot to do with our successes and bring in some of the other challenges. A look ahead, of course, because we are definitely trying to keep pace with the demands. And then I am going to talk about the Reading Air Attack Base that's owned by the U.S. Forest Service. I was asked to speak about that, and I think it's actually a great project to talk about. All right, so I'm going to try to go fast because I know the time. So hang on, and we'll get started here. So I wanted to kind of share a little bit of our catchment area for our Reading Regional Airport. This is the typical catchment area that we define of who uses our field, our airport. And thank you. And so with Chico not having some air service, we actually do pull from the Chico area. In fact, sorry that this isn't an actual screenshot. I actually took a picture of this because I was impressed with it and I want to do more studies like this. But this is a heat map using that creepy cell phone data that's anonymous. We actually pull from Oregon, like Medford, and as far south as Willows, which is close to Sacramento. So we really are a regional airport. And you can see Reading is primarily the focus there, and then we have some on the coast. So in 2019 was a really good year for our air service in recent years, and it's actually kind of the benchmark that I've been using to kind of compare how we're doing now. And so the pie chart on the right is our total catchment area. Those are the actual passengers daily that fly, period. And we know that Reading, based on various data, credit card statements and things like that with zip codes, that Reading was only capturing about 18%. The rest were traveling down Highway 5 to Sacramento, to SFO, and other airports. So the passengers daily each way, are about 804. And that's for the area that we should be capturing. So with some of the recent air service successes, what you see here is we have a 70-seater in the front, a 50-seater behind that, another 50-seater, and then a 189-seat aircraft. Now our terminal, it was only really kind of designed for 30 and 50-seat aircraft, and with more air service and the upgauging of aircraft, it's kind of constrained our facilities. And we're certainly looking at, keeping pace with that demand. And I'll go over a little bit more about what we're doing there. So now we have some more recent data. In 2022, we noticed with this air service uptick that we are now capturing about 27%. So it's still roughly a quarter of what we could be doing. And so I'm personally benchmarking about 50% just to make sure that we do something reasonable, because I'm sure people are still going to go down the corridor to Sacramento for like Southwest. That's definitely our major competitor airport. And so, with things increasing at Reading, the population driving to Sacramento is going down. And so that's relieving a lot of the congestion. I've always felt like aircraft are the ultimate HOV, depending on where you want to go. But and the studies are kind of changing. I was actually kind of curious before I presented to this group, what do the emissions look like with a vehicle compared to aircraft? And there's various studies, because it depends on what type of aircraft you're talking about, because there's more efficient aircraft now. So especially if you fill up the aircraft, the emission kind of goal is actually more favorable. So I'm going to give a couple of representations of what I see every day. When I first started with the city, I've been with the city roughly about 4 years. This was a typical regional jet just waiting at baggage claim. We only had one belt. And then here's a typical day, more routinely, of overlapping flights like you saw with the aircraft on the ramp. And this has definitely constrained our 32,000 square foot terminal. And we definitely are trying to find ways to keep pace with this, as well as other changes with resiliency and sustainability. So what exactly happened? Well, the city and the community has made some investments. So the LA flight, for example, that was a revenue guarantee about $1 million. And that is it's a mechanism to allow an airline to come in with a lot less risk and help mature a flight. Now, nearly every dollar was spent on that, but it did what it was supposed to do, which was mature that Los Angeles service. And so that was with a 50-seat aircraft, and we are starting to see 70 seats aircraft scheduled right now. And before COVID, we actually saw a second flight scheduled, but COVID certainly changed that and added to the pilot shortage issue. We also had an ultra low-cost carrier, Avelo Airlines. So this one was a risk because, they're a startup, and being in the Bay Area with Palo Alto Airport, San Mateo County, I've seen a lot of startups. I've seen them work, and I was curious. They reached out just to kind of get some information, but I did some old school, just keep in constant contact, and I was able to get them to continue to look at Reading. And when they did start service, it was well received by our community. So they fly a 737-800, which is that 189-seat aircraft, and they also fly a 700 series, which is 147. Also, in a short amount of time, we also had Alaska Airlines start daily service to Seattle. And that one was well received. It was another way to get around. And by contrast with the value that it added, San Francisco offers about 115 connections. LA would offer 65 connections. Seattle would offer about 115 connections as well. So it was just another way for folks to get around, and it added value to our community. And they're considered a low-cost airline. And it brought in it gave that airfare competition factor. It worked because it brought airlines down from their premium at a regional airport. So here's a look at kind of where we serve and where we anticipate serving. So we have a $1 million revenue guarantee in hand. It's from the Department of Transportation. It's called a Small Community Air Service Development Grant, and that's to start a new air service to a new market. So Denver is listed there, and we're just waiting for this pilot shortage to get better. And it was already an issue before COVID, but it was exacerbated during COVID. And we also had Las Vegas service, and we recently lost that only because it needed that 700-seat aircraft rather than the 800. So that 800 seat was moved to another market on the East Coast, and we anticipate that coming back once the 700 series is acquired. Here's a fun fact. So Reading, which is normally one of those, rural airports that feeds into a hub, is actually starting to look like a hub airport because we're seeing people go from Los Angeles to Reading, connecting to San Francisco, and then vice versa, and even interline like Alaska from Seattle to Reading to like LA or San Francisco. So it's really kind of interesting to see the economics of our airport. Here is our total passengers moved. So back in the past, we've had Essential Air Service subsidized, grants, and you can tell when they dropped off. And then 2019, you can see it spike again, and then COVID. And then during COVID was when we acquired those new services and are just taking off, no pun intended. So we also did a recent thing with an airport strategic plan. We wanted to see what was the economic value of our airport. So if RDD, for example, vanished today, what would it do to the local economy? And so we found it would, and this is a pretty conservative number, it should be higher, but about 218 million would vanish with it. So that was pretty impressive to learn based on a consultant coming in and doing various models. So we also are doing what's called a forecast, and you have to use methodologies that the FAA approves, and based on our growth and some past history, and then some assumptions of, remember that pie, we're only capturing even now with our successes about a quarter, and we still have so much more potential, and that is definitely where we're headed. So we submitted some forecasts earlier this year. We've adjusted it based on some FAA feedback, and we're waiting to get those results. But once we know the number of passengers on that 20-year end, then we get so many square feet per passenger, and we can size our terminal. And then when we do the terminal, we are definitely going to be looking at sustainability measures, and because we certainly have some challenges with how the aviation industry is changing. So, sorry about the formatting. But basically, what we're looking at right now is aviation is going to alternative fuels. You're probably going to have an interim hydrogen type of situation, but hydrogen is definitely more expensive. But electrification, it's happening, and we're already seeing that. So this is a tug, for example, that is diesel powered, and it actually left the premise today. It was replaced with an electric aircraft, but we're definitely seeing some changes in our industry. So here is our vision statement. Reading Regional Airport aspires to be a regional leader that provides economic vitality, public safety, and resource protection. We will do this by operating proactively, promoting sustainable growth, and remaining engaged in the developing world of aviation. So that was from our airport strategic plan. We definitely, with the changes we are seeing, we knew we needed to have a look ahead and try to keep pace with all of these changes that we're experiencing. So here's an example of one tug, a diesel tug going over to electric. Now that puts an additional strain on our electrical infrastructure in the terminal. And so seeing something like this with, we have tugs now that are pulling the baggage carts, baggage belts, these are all electric, more baggage belts, water, and then in the background, we're even replacing our fleet with plug-in hybrid vehicles. So this is all going to start adding up. and we're doing all these little, bit by bit infrastructure improvements, but it doesn't consider what the airlines are going to do with their larger aircraft, the air cargo, the businesses with that do air cargo at the airport, even private flying, the terminal. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure needed in order to keep pace with all the changes. So last winter, Alaska changed their aircraft from a Q400, which is a 76-seat aircraft, to an Embraer E175. And it's the same number of seats, but a lot more efficient, definitely reduces emissions. And that's just one of the short-term kind of changes that the industry is doing. We know that United's going to do the same thing with their regional jets, move into these more efficient aircraft. They're faster, which helps with the air crew time buildup, which is, in my opinion, the most valuable resource right now when you start a new market. It's not so much the aircraft anymore, it's the pilots. So here's some more changes. We know, there's a lot of airlines investing billions of dollars into electrical aircraft. There's a lot of talk about, short-range electric aircraft. Air Canada, for example, thinks that they're going to start around 2028. The air cargo market is already looking at starting using electric aircraft by 2025. And, if that happens at RDD, we're not ready. I mean, we don't have the electrical infrastructure. The costs are just too much for our airport. Our airport is kind of like a general aviation airport that happens to have air service. We're like in the Goldilocks zone of can't afford anything and have the headache of the big airports. So it's definitely something that we're trying to come up with a plan on how to address. But electric aircraft, they're coming. So what did I say here? Oh, the electric grid. So, the aircraft have shorter ranges. I do see our San Francisco flight, for example, being the first one that's going to see an electric aircraft. And then as that technology improves, whether they use capacitors or whatever else they're going to do, battery swapping and other things, they're probably going to expand to other markets, especially for regional airports like ours. So we're not ready, but we're trying to get ready. And we are, everything is very expensive. And so without grants, general aviation airports, small commercial service airports, they really don't have the revenues, and we don't get tax dollars unless there's some sort of injection from the general fund. But we rely on concessions and user fees to do everything that we're supposed to do. So now I'm going to talk about the Reading Air Attack Base. So this is it's about 30 or 40 acres northwest of our airport runway. And it's been, long-standing neighbor of ours. We recently leased to the Forest Service a 7-acre parcel that they can develop. Right now, they are underway with a $24 million modernization project. And you can see that they have, we're no stranger to fires and everything, but this air attack base sees a ton of aircraft. You'll have your OV-10s, which will do kind of your command and control, if you will, over the fire, and your S-2s are the small ones. We get a ton of C-130s from the military, and so the U.S. Forest Service will summon those aircraft to help fight these large fires. And then you have Bach jets, and we just see a ton of C-130s and MD-87s and 737s. We can't support the DC-10 right now. We don't have enough runway, but this is a snapshot of 2021. This was probably the best I could come up with, where we were launching aircraft. The tanker base was launching aircraft in every single direction. Even Southern Oregon, Nevada, we were just going busy. And one of the things that's interesting about Reading is it's when this inversion layer happens, as warm air, it pushes the smoke down and it shuts off visibility of all the other bases that are higher elevation. So Reading gets even busier. And I will never turn away aircraft, and hopefully the FAA is not listening, but I will shut down movement areas like taxiways and even our crosswind runway to be able to park the aircraft, because if those resources are needed here, we're going to keep them here. So the 2021 was a really, really bad year. These are the 5 pits that they have. They can only reload 2 aircraft at a time, so they're constrained. So this modernization project that they're doing is actually going to allow them to reload 5 aircraft at a time, and that'll definitely increase their efficiency. So they're going to redesign the taxiway. So right now it's an open dirt pit right now. They're getting things ready, electrical infrastructure, and they're going to start some of the paving here soon. But hopefully by the middle of this summer, they're going to be up in operation. And I'm told, with the exception of the heavy aircraft like the DC-10s, this is going to be the tanker base, what do they call it? The flagship of tanker bases in the world. So it's going to have everything that you need. It's going to be super efficient, about 150% more efficient. And this also means that the aircraft that are normally sent other places to go get fuel and reload will actually be coming back to to Reading because they'll be able to handle it. As it is, these tankers will be waiting in line to get reloaded. So this will really increase the efficiency of the fire attack operations. It'll save a lot of time so they're not having to go somewhere further away. So there's going to be a lot of economic efficiencies, and certainly those that are going to help make them more effective and protect our community. So I'm going to stop there. With that, are there any questions for me or the airport? Yes, sir. Oh, we need a microphone.
Thank you for the presentation. You presented what was it, 200 or 318 that you felt that the million that the airport brought in?
218, yep.
Yeah, 218. Did that include the fire attack base, that part?
It didn't. It included the jobs around the airlines and the businesses based at the airport. They were certainly consulted as far as their jobs, but the problem is they get an influx of people seasonally, and that wasn't captured actually. Any other questions? I think Josh Anthony in the back there is going to buy drinks here, and yeah. See, he said yes. All right. Well, thank you for having me. This is an incredible group.
Okay. We'll have Sean come up here and give some closing remarks and also logistics for tomorrow and inform everybody. Before he does that, I want to thank all of you. This has been great. The North State Super Region is a really cool crowd. All the cool kids belong to the Super Region. I call them my Super Region super friends, and we're out doing great things. Thank you very much. Obviously, having this opportunity to us is very special. Yeah, by all means, give him a hand. Anyway, and so I'm going to shut up. Sean's going to briefly give you some closing remarks and some other stuff, and then we're going to go partay.
Thanks, John. To be admitted, the closing remarks was partly a placeholder in case we were running behind and everything. But I do have kind of a on-the-spot question. We thank you, commissioners, for coming here today and hearing. One thing I think some are interested in hearing, and maybe you can each all briefly share, and I will put you on the spot just because we had the opportunity, is from the things that you've learned and heard today, what would be one or two most significant takeaways that you came from with today in rural regions and the challenges that we deal with and how we partner together?
I will start.
That's why we elected you chair.
Well, thank you so much. So first, I do apologize that I had to step out, but in case any of you were wondering, Director Tavares did wonderfully. He did beautifully. He was brilliant. So I'm sure it's all fine. But for those of you who don't know, I am Leanne Eager, and I'm from the Central Valley of California, born and raised in Fresno. So rural counties are certainly something that I know about and advocate for throughout my lifetime. You know, one of the things that has been interesting, I think you asked about, has anybody ever driven down the 70 and the 99 in that area? When my children were little, we had a membership in the R Ranch off of the 36, out of Red Bluff, which is the horse ranch not too far from here. And so we drove from Fresno through Sacramento up to the 70 because my husband's family is from Live Oak. And Amarjeet, I think he drove through there today because he sent me pictures of Eager Road in Live Oak, which was named after my father-in-law who developed that area. And then we drove through here. So I have wonderful memories of this entire area. And the airport is much improved since a couple of times that I had flown in there before. So I'm thrilled with what you all are doing for this area. Certainly from my standpoint, and I'm sure from my fellow commissioners, we get that part about rural regions and smaller regions and what are, those obstacles in order to be competitive in the funding. I had no idea that y'all work together so closely. I certainly learned that here today. What a great super region you are. Now I have all these new super friends. We should have those S's on our shirts. But really learning what those obstacles that you all have because of the safety issues up here. In the Central Valley, we have some of those because we have the fires certainly around there, but we have ways to get out. And, having been, I think my very first CTC meeting, I was not a commissioner. I was flown up to the state of Washington to talk about transit in the Central Valley and some of those issues there. And the mayor of Paradise at the time, that fire had just happened, and they flew her there to talk about what those issues were. And so, learning what y'all have done to rebuild and certainly to recapture what was lost during that time period is wonderful after all of these years. So obviously I've learned a lot today. I'm interested in learning more tomorrow. I'm a little bit scared to go across the bridge after you told me. But it'll be a good learning experience for me.
Just be thankful they're not putting you on the bike path. I would like to thank all of you for doing this for us today. I mean, you're thanking us for coming here, but you guys put a tremendous amount of work into this agenda. You marinated us in information. I mean, we're just full of all new stuff that we don't get the chance to learn about. I mean, you've watched our meetings. We've got over 100 items on our agenda. We've got 1,200 more plus pages of stuff to review. And I mean, we get to spend some time having fun talking about some of the updates and policy issues and guidance and things like that. But once we get into spending the money, I mean, it's just move through these items. And we don't get a lot of time to dig deep on some of these projects and really learn about them. So I really appreciate how you put the agenda together, the fact you got all this information to us, and we absorbed a lot of it. I mean, obviously, I still have a lot to learn, but I do appreciate all the work that went into doing this today, and thank you for doing it. I do appreciate that United Express flight from LAX to Reading, because I've done the drive from Sacramento before, and it's not nearly as pleasant as flying the whole way. It is actually. It's actually very nice. I learned a lot. I really did, and I mean, some of the things that really stand out. The Pitt River Bridge conundrum is something I never really knew and understood or appreciated, and I have a much better understanding of what's going on with that, and so I got a lot out of that. And I thought the presentation on the induced traffic in rural areas and the study that's ongoing was really very helpful. It's going to be very interesting to see what's there, because a lot of very important issues were raised, and we do have to not treat everybody the same when it comes to these issues, and I thought there was a lot of good points, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the final study. So all of that's really, important, and obviously the emergency stuff and the Paradise issue is, you can't help but, get kind of emotional about what you guys have been through and how you've dealt with it, and it's so encouraging to hear the response and bringing back that town and bringing back those residents and doing it in a way that's going to make them safer in the future. Can't express enough thanks for all of that. So again, I mean, thank you guys for doing this. We really do appreciate the opportunity to do it. Can't guarantee we'll be back next year, but yeah, another time, and you're always free to visit us. And when we come to Sacramento, we're only a couple hours away.
Well, I want to echo my fellow commissioners that have already spoken and really thank you for a tremendous day today. The information, the education, but what really stands out for me is the collaboration and the passion. Where I'm sitting and what I heard today and watched and observed is that you're all not only leaders and problem solvers, but also you have a passion for it, which I really appreciate a lot. It gives me inspiration to engage more. I'll echo Leanne and Joe on some issues. What I would add to it is that learning about really, there's a lot of talk in transportation all the time, rightfully so, about safety, life safety, complete streets, active transportation. Connectivity is kind of a broad term that's put out there. Integration, multimodal, all this stuff. But that we have to look at the rural areas not as some kind of separate from the state, jurisdiction, so to speak, but that it has different kinds of development, different kinds of connectivity needed, different kinds of integration. And, when we were looking at stuff in the, out around the Fresno area and down south of Fresno, similarly, that what happens on the infrastructure, whether it be the highways and how things evolve and look towards EV and everything else, but there's a real life safety issue going on. The other side that kept coming out for me today, it is this, while we're talking transportation infrastructure, how it affects housing, how it affects the economic viability of the region, and how it's really important. And I believe a huge part of our role at CTC, we don't have jurisdiction on everything, that we look at all that and how can we support that to support that broad community. And it has to be focused on safety and resiliency and viability. One thing I would share without violating Bagley-Keene, in that we often, in small groups as commissioners, will meet local transportation commissions or RTAs, et cetera, right, to talk about, prior to the big transportation commission meetings, to get a better, deeper view where we can slow us fast a little bit to really drill into this stuff. And I'm not aware, and that means maybe I missed an invite or something, but I'm not aware of projects recently, at least in the last year up in this area, where that's been taken advantage of. And I could be wrong. I've missed some stuff before, no doubt, but just to put it out there, that there's opportunity there, I don't want to say one over any of the other ones, but looking at the financial troubles and challenges on certain projects, areas, the bridge is really stuck on that a bit for a lot of reasons. But all of that, and wherever we can, and I want to thank staff again, and I don't exaggerate, that they're the best of any agency out there. But they really, because they have that passion and commitment that I was talking about earlier. But we should be able to come up with solutions on that, because at the end of the day, without fixes, real fixes that are long-lasting in the state, looking at all of it, including the environmental future of our state, it's up to us to come up with those solutions together. And we can debate, have disagreements, and that's awesome. But this is our great state we live in. And so, but you modeled that for this, Commissioner, today, really bringing solutions forward and commitment. And I don't think, if we don't have passion for it, we're probably not in the right seat. So thank you for that, because that means a lot. You're serving your community well. You're serving the state well. And it's an honor to be here with you today.
Hard to follow those comments. But let me say, I appreciate the work that's gone into today and sort of enlightening us on what the priorities of the North State are. I'm an avid fisherman, and I've seen the Pitt River Bridge from the pilings and fished those pilings. numerous times and understand the date and, how that bridge operates, but also understand at some point we have to do some good work to improve it. I do spend a lot of time. I'm the Sacramento representative now on the CTC, but I also take pride in understanding what the needs are of our rural partners in the north. So please, I know the commissioners have said that we have an open door policy, but I especially want to be a partner in improving the lives, quality of life, our transportation infrastructure in the north part of the state. I know how valuable the goods movement piece, the safety element is, the tourism aspects of this part of the state are to keeping our economy healthy, but also understand that we need to provide transportation choices for folks who sometimes don't have a car or don't have the means to get around. But because our resources are so limited, we really have to be strategic in how we approach these sort of solutions. And I know, because I've worked on a number of self-help campaigns, the challenge of trying to leverage federal and state dollars when you don't have a local match, and how you have to position those projects and be exceptionally good at positioning those projects and making a case to take down those dollars. And I think there's a story to tell in this part of the state of why it's important we continue to invest in people and in infrastructure to keep us competitive. The agricultural piece speaks for itself. I drive along Highway 70 and 99 and see during the spring and summer the trucks that move through those corridors and what that production means to our economy. So again, I appreciate all the hard work. I commend, especially, I was impressed with just the recovery and rebuilding effort in Paradise and all the work that went into that and continuing to go into that because that was a scary event for all of us. So please call on me whenever anybody in the room needs help or would like some advice or wants to position a project to be successful. Consider being part of the north part of the state as a representative on this commission.
Thank you. Michael, were there any commissioners online? I know we had them earlier, but just want to make sure. No? Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. It's been an informative and fun afternoon to hear about all the different projects and how we can partner and work together. Before we close here, I want to do some acknowledgments for some folks that have helped make this possible. First, John, I'd like to thank you for emceeing and being some guidance throughout the process for the effort. Michael Cooker and Amy Lindsay, could you both stand up? Michael was key in making a lot of this all possible. If it wasn't without him, I would probably be outside crying to make it happen. And it's been very helpful. He was a help with there, and Amy as well today, to make things possible. I want to again thank our sponsors here today. First, James with Mark Thomas, is you and your staff here. Could you stand up? Thank you. GHD, Russ, and your staff, can you stand up? Thank you. DKS, Jim Jamkowitz, you and your staff? Thank you. And I don't know if I saw them earlier. Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, did they make it up here? They might not have today. Okay, I don't see them. Well, thank you for Juan and Bill for your support as well. With that, thank you everyone for coming today. It's been a pleasure to have everyone here.